Tipp Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. Slattery'sGarage.ie.
Good morning. Welcome along to Tipp Today, 1800 938 007. That's our free phone number. It won't cost you if you'd like to make a call to us. And Leanne is producing today. We are coming to you live from Pierce Street in Nenagh. Coming up on the show this morning, I'll be speaking to Father Michael Twomey, who will share his concern at the loss of coroner-led post-mortems in the southeast of the country. We'll look back at factories and industries that have closed their doors around the county. That continues on. Deputy Seamus Healy will talk to us after 10 o'clock. Ultan has the gardening. He'll be with us live in studio, as will our GP, Dr. Pat Harrold. So all of that and more on the way live from Nenagh this morning. You can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. You can email tiptoday@tipfm.com. Let's have a look at the front pages of some of your newspapers today. The Irish Indo leading with the story that the family of murdered Mason O'Connell Conway, the 4-year-old, have questioned why he was in the care of his father, John Paul O'Connell, and killer stepmother, Tegan McGee, despite concerns being raised with Tusla before he died. The Indo is dominated by a photograph of Enoch Burke, because, as you're probably aware, a judge freed Enoch Burke to allow him to prepare an appeal over his sacking, despite the teacher failing to purge his contempt. But Enoch Burke vowed to turn up for work today at Wilson's Hospital School in defiance of the court order. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The Irish Times is dominated by a photograph of that little boy who was murdered, Mason O'Connell Conway, is a beautiful little boy. And the piece inside the Times that gives the detail of his death and his killing is just, it doesn't make for easy reading for sure. The lead story on the Times today: Denmark is to expand its permanent military presence in Greenland with immediate effect after frank but constructive White House talks over the future of the Arctic island ended after just 50 minutes. Also on the Times, it's interesting to read that a single data centre in West Dublin consumes 10 times the electricity of a nearby pharmaceutical plant employing 2,000 people, equivalent to enough power for 200,000 homes, according to an internal government document. Let's have a look at the Examiner. And the lead story on the Examiner today: the HSE has issued a sincere and unreserved apology after an inquest found there was a medical misadventure in the death of a Limerick mother after a home birth. And the young mother in question, Laura Liston, who died in the early hours of June 5th, 2022 at UHL. And finally, let's have a look at the Irish Daily Mail. And it's a story about Michael Flatley, because he's been accused of trying to hijack the highly successful Lord of the Dance tour in order to strip it of its cash to fund his debts and his personal lifestyle. That's a look at what's making headlines. If you'd like to make comments on any of that, again, text WhatsApp 083 311 3311. Now, the loss of the coroner-led post-mortems at University Hospital Waterford has been described as a devastating blow for hundreds of families in the southeast region. The Department of Justice said in 2025 that it is aware that UHW intended to discontinue the delivery of coroner-directed post-mortem examinations from the 1st of January this year. I'm joined now by Father Michael Twomey from the pastoral parish of Carlos Acutis. Good morning to you, Father Michael.
Morning, Fran, to all your listeners. How are you today?
Thank you for coming on with us today. You were seeing the real effect of the loss of this service in your own parish there, Father Michael.
Yes, so, Fran, this is what I'd call an active issue that's happening in our parish at the moment to some of my parishioners, and I speak to you today with their permission. So just to give you a scenario that's happening. So last Sunday, I got a call, and sadly I was informed that a person had died quite suddenly at home. and her husband and her daughter were there, and obviously grandchildren involved. So they've had to deal, obviously, with the sudden loss last Sunday morning. So when I was there, I assisted with prayers, obviously, and I assisted the Gardaí and the undertaker while the lady was taken by the mortuary ambulance on Sunday morning to Waterford for a post-mortem, which is normal because that's what's required by law, but also the family want to know exactly what's happened. So normally at this stage, Fran, we would have had the funeral either yesterday or today at the latest. That's what normally would have happened. Because of the changes that have now happened in pathology in Waterford for the post-mortem, it hasn't been done yet. And the family have only been told it is hoped that it will be done tomorrow by lunchtime. It's hoped. So it means that the funeral can't take place until at least Sunday. And as you know, Fran, we generally don't allow funerals on a Sunday in our diocese because of the workload we have, except for pastoral reasons. And this is obviously a pastoral reason. So there will be a funeral. We've scheduled it in for Sunday, but we can't doubly confirm it until we know the post-mortem has been completed. And I'll be doing it on Sunday because I can't allow this family to have this trauma drag on anymore. Sure. Yeah. And really, Fran, I'm just highlighting it to you today, Fran, and to your listeners, that despite the best efforts I know of many in the Dáil, etc., funerals will now be severely delayed and are being delayed because of the issues of the lack of pathologists now available in Waterford area, which covers Tipperary. And as you said, it has been, it was mentioned last year. It was actually mentioned 18 months ago, I believe, that the Department of Justice were informed that this would be stopping. So the delay for the post-mortem for this particular person has been the fact that they are bringing in, I believe, pathologists from the UK to help cover this loss. The person who was covering took ill, not her fault. It happens, people get sick, but there was no cover, so that's put a backlog on and everything. So I'm just kind of highlighting, Fran, that this is a live issue. It's happening, and it will affect people, and just to be aware of it.
Yeah, and we spoke about it a number of times last year. Part of the issue, I'm not sure how much you've looked into this, Father Michael, but part of the issue appears to be that it's falling between several stools of the Department of Justice, for example. Yeah. Needless to say, the HSE, the Gardaí in there as well. So that's what part of the reason I think that it's so complicated.
Yeah, but pathologists are no longer doing post-mortems in Waterford, so there are issues there as well which needed to be addressed and I don't think have been addressed. I don't know the full background to this either, Fran. I just know that at the coalface, this is what we are now facing in reality. I do know that there are severe delays in Limerick. I think in Dublin, I think there's nearly a 2-week waiting list, so it's not just happening in our area, it is happening across the country. Sadly, we've mentioned that in the past, myself and yourself, Fran, are we seeing a scenario where, like in England, you could be waiting up to 6 or 8 weeks for a funeral. I think that day is coming upon us for various reasons now. So I think people need to be... I'm just kind of on a pastoral level here, Fran, being with people. If someone sadly dies suddenly and there's a post-mortem, don't start planning a funeral within a few days. You're going to have to wait.
And when this combines with your own issues and your own and your colleagues, just the amount of work that you have to get through, Father Michael, it's glaringly obvious that there will be long waiting periods for families.
And a brother priest of mine in County Waterford, he now has 3 funerals, one after the other, I think, later this week, because of the delays that have happened. I think he was telling me one of the people had died naturally, so there was no post-mortem, but the funeral's been booked. But because there were delays in 1 or 2 others, that everything now has basically landed together. And that's not pastorally good either. I remember one day I did celebrate 3 funerals, and that is my role, that's my job, and it's a sad honour to do it. But you would be mentally and physically drained after that because you have to then refocus. So we have to look after ourselves as well in all of these situations, not just priests, anyone dealing with funeral ceremonies, funeral celebrants themselves and other religions. But I'm just kind of highlighting it to you, Fran, and thanks for allowing me to do it, that, just letting people know there is going to be delays to funerals for the foreseeable future while this issue is still unresolved.
What doesn't help, I know, is that there's a global shortage of appropriately qualified pathologists willing to provide autopsy services, so that's playing into the difficulties as well. But what's annoying people, and what's annoyed people when we discussed this last year, Father Michael, was that, the hospital got enough notice that this was, the government and the department got enough notice that this was going to be the case.
They got 18 months, they were told us. I know it was raised in the door by Michael Murphy in December even, and he raised those very similar concerns. And I think he raised it with the relevant minister at the time. Everyone is very sympathetic towards it, but unfortunately there's nothing really happening at the moment, that despite we told you so, this is what we're saying, we have told you that this is happening. And I'm just highlighting for this particular family, and my sympathies, of course, go to them, and I'll give them as much pastoral support as we can and assist them. But there's very little we can do at the moment until basically the body is released, and the undertakers can do nothing. We can't really put any formal plans in place. I personally, I can't do a funeral on Monday this week as well. I have another issue I have to deal with. So Sunday is actually the best option at the moment. Otherwise, you're looking at Tuesday or Wednesday next week, and that certainly isn't appropriate in this family's case, and I don't want them to go through any more. So we as priests, and I know others in other religions, will do all we can to assist, but, this is the reality that we're going to be facing, Fran.
Well, we'll be speaking to Deputy Seamus Healy a little later on in the programme, and we'll certainly bring it up with him, and I know he's spoken to me in the past about this as well. Father Michael, can I just ask you, I'm not sure if you were listening yesterday, but we spoke to Father Iggy O'Donovan about Mary McAleese's article in the Irish Times about baptism, and it caused quite a controversy around the country. A lot of people discussing it, and she was of the opinion that Catholicism imposed on infants, because obviously they have no say, but to take on being Catholic as an infant. Have you thoughts on that?
I haven't actually read the article, but I was aware of it, and I didn't hear the interview yesterday, unfortunately. As I say, I'm dealing with another issue at the moment as well. But my own thoughts were, ironically, last weekend was the baptism of the Lord, and we had masses with our 6th class students, and I was telling them the day of my baptism, and I was asking them to, for children to check in with their own parents and godparents, what was their baptism like. And I always give the funny story that I was baptised in London, and it was apparently it was a very horrible day, thunder, lightning, and I was kicking and screaming and shouting and, gurgling, and I think I got sick on the priest. And I think the priest finally said, "Get him out of this church." And then I just say, "And look what happened to me," So it's just a story that I add to it. And I just remind the children, you were baptised into the faith because your parents are Catholic, and they were all, maybe not both Catholic, but they wanted to be brought up in the Catholic faith, and they did that with love and with care, and it is their responsibility to raise the child to the best of their ability. They don't have to have a theology degree or anything. And the day of confirmation is a day when they are becoming adults, and they make a decision whether or not they wish to maybe confirm. So that is maybe where we are in Ireland. I know it automatically, sadly, just takes place in 6th class.
Yes.
In England, I was 15, I was in 3rd year when I made a decision to be confirmed. So that's perhaps an issue that could be discussed further. But baptism being imposed, but it's not. But I mean, in the Jewish tradition, babies are named and brought in through their own faith and everything, and Muslim. I mean, it is just, it's the way of society, it's the way of faith and that. I don't think baptism is imposed on anyone. It's given freely as a gift to people. And later on in life, people make a decision whether they wish to be confirmed fully into the Catholic faith or not. As I say, I didn't read the article. I was not aware of it, so I might be off on a different tangent here. But, it's a very joyful day. I absolutely love meeting people and families at baptisms. It's a great way of connecting with people. It's a joyful thing in the sadness. I'm talking about funerals, and the joyful part is, of course, baptisms and that. And it really is, it's one of the honours of my ministry to be able to be with parents and godparents and bring children into the faith and to see them grow. And it's amazing, when I did the baptism a few years ago, the very first child I baptised was there as well, and we had a picture of the 3 of us, the recently baptised, the eldest who was about 16 at the time, and myself. And I think, God, I am getting old now. But it's lovely to see that, and baptism is a wonderful sacrament for people. And it's a wonderful sacrament for families and for godparents, and of course for the child themselves. So I'm sorry there seems to be some negativity around it from the former president. Whatever her issues are with that, I don't know. As I say, I haven't read it. But for me, it's a joy to do.
Well, you gave a very good answer indeed, considering you didn't see the article. Father Michael, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
God bless.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good morning to you. That's Father Michael Twomey there. From the pastoral parish of Carlos Acutis. We are live from Nenagh today. It's 9:20. We'll take a break back in just a moment.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Now, we've been looking back at factories and industries that have closed their doors around the county over the last few decades, and indeed chatting about the effect of those closures on the various communities. Now, one in particular I was anxious to talk about was the Cashel textile factory, and I'm delighted to be joined now from Cashel by former County Councillor Tom Wood. Good morning to you, Tom.
Good morning, Fran. How are you?
And good to talk to you today, Tom. The textile factory, Tom, what do you remember of the genesis of it?
Yeah, in fact, it was funny, Fran. It's only in the last couple of days that I've been asking people around town, what they remember of the textile factory. And as you said, it was basically known as the textile factory. Yeah. But it opened in 1969. And it opened on the site of the former railway station down on the Dundrum Road. Now, the railway station itself had opened in 1904 and closed in 1954. So it had only lasted for about 50 years. So in 1969, it was a Dutch company known as Phoenix Yarns. You might have heard of that word in the past.
Oh, that brings me back so many memories.
Now, they had a factory in Thurles, I believe, before the Cashel one. I think Dunn Stores and the shopping centre are on the site over in Thurles at the moment. And they had another one in Rathdowney at the time.
Yes.
So that's a Dutch company, Phoenix Yarns. And in 1969, I think it was towards the end of the year, someone was telling me, there was a kind of an official opening down at the factory, and the drinks and some of the food was served by staff from the Cashel King's Hotel, or the motel as we knew it, out on the side of the hill on the old Dublin Road, long since gone again, of course.
Yeah.
So there's a great bit of history to it there. The main people at the time, the chief people, and I could remember their names in the last couple of days when I was talking to people. One of those who was fully responsible nearly for the establishment of it and the construction was a man called Al Fallon. There was a Gordon Capstick.
Yes.
Do you remember that name?
I do indeed. I remember his daughter was a dancer in the time as well.
Right.
Yeah.
A George Robinson.
Yeah.
There was an Indian man, a Ben Lassay. Martin Lavin, who lived up on the old road, the Lavin family.
Absolutely. I went to school with his son in the CDS, in fact, yeah.
And Norman Lund, who still lives above, actually, in his house in Palmer's Hill with his wife. I went up yesterday to have a chat with him.
Wow.
He's in his early 90s. And then there was another man, I don't know his Christian name, but he had Cashel connections, I think. Ogden was the surname, Ogden. Oh. And they were the principal people involved in the management of it and supervisory positions, etc., etc. Now, the other interesting thing, Fran, was that at the time they had bought a number of bungalows around town. And the 3 bungalows on the Camas Road, just there in front of the walk up to the Bohernamarv, up to the Rock, those 3 bungalows were inhabited by people from the management level of the factory. They also had a house on Palmer's Hill, and they had another one on the old road. So they had a number of properties in town where the head people in the company.
Right. And they came into
resided.
Cashel, Tom, to manage the factory. Is that it? They
came to manage the factory. Yeah. Now, part of the factory I can still picture it myself.
Yeah.
When the old railway station was there, Fran, the old ticket office was a kind of a galvanised clad building on the platform. Mm. That was still there during that time, and that was the office for the office staff in the factory itself. Now, somebody said to me the other day when I was talking to them, they said, sure, half the town worked there.
Yeah, it's true.
And a bus even brought workers to and from Dundrum and from the Knockavilla area at that time. Now, my own brother Liam, who passed away last year, Liam worked in the dyeing plant at the time, and that's where Martin Lavin was positioned as well, in the dyeing plant. Now, there was a fire there then, Fran, just a short time after its opening. It opened in 69, and there was a fire in 72 or 73, and there was quite an amount of damage caused, because I'd say a lot of the structure was still part of the old railway structure that was there years earlier. So it was all rebuilt. And coincidentally yesterday, on the street, I met Billy McCarthy from Lacey Square. And I just said to Billy, any idea, I said, about the fire that was down in the textile factory years ago? Oh, he says, I worked, he says, on the rebuilding of it.
Wow, wow.
So there was a great coincidence there.
Wasn't it?
And they put in concrete floors, etc., that wouldn't probably have been in when they came in 1969. My own brother Richard was telling me it was extremely busy. They actually had 2 shifts there at the time, and of course many of the factories then I noticed in the we'll say the late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of closures around the country. A lot of textile factories in particular were closing, and it was a lot of it was due, I think, Fran, to the imports that were coming in, the cheaper imports. So it was about the early 1990s that the factory closed its door finally. And I was just thinking yesterday, and I was talking to Al Mooney. Remember Albert Mooney here in town? Yes. Albert worked there. In fact, his wife Catherine worked there as well. A lot of the people that worked there at the time would have met their future partners there. There was a great camaraderie down in the textile factory. And names turned up like Martin Cummins, who's still alive today, Bilsy Murphy, Johnny Dunphy, Al Mooney himself, Catherine. There was Toss Mylan. You know Toss Mylan? Bridie Fogarty, who was Jack Fogarty's wife. Remember?
Yes, of course.
Bridie Fogarty. Bilsy Ferncombe, Paddy Comerford, Tony Kane, Noreen Doheny, who only died there a couple of weeks ago, Mrs. Doheny. She worked there. Danny Hickey, Julie Corcoran from Bortlock Street, Matty Sweeney, Dick Luby. Dick had worked in the Gowan and Smith Bakery, and it had closed down at the time.
I didn't know that Dick Luby worked there.
Yeah,
he was a neighbour of ours.
That's right. Well, he was some kind of a supervisor down there. There was Jack Leamy, Frankie Kelly, who was still around, of course, living up on the old road, Johnny McCarthy. Patsy Lacey actually worked there.
Did Patsy work there?
After the closure of the Rock Cinema, Patsy Lacey, and I believe there was great. You can imagine what was happening when Patsy was down there.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, and they were just a few now. There was a very, very substantial number there. And even yesterday I was told, which was very unusual, and of course never really thought about, a travelling girl who used to come to our house years earlier in Ardwira. She'd come nearly on a weekly basis on a Friday to my mother, and my mother would give her something. She actually worked down in the textile factory.
Did she?
Yeah, she worked in the factory. And of course, Fran, as you know yourself, factories, that was about the only factory we knew of in our lifetime.
Yeah, for sure.
A factory like. Now, there were other business. I mean, it was a huge loss when it closed. And I was told yesterday that a lot of the lads that worked there never worked afterwards.
Did they not?
And a lot of them didn't have their own transport, so they couldn't even move out of town to work elsewhere. So some of them, quite a lot of them, never even worked afterwards.
And I think, Tom, it was a shock announcement, was it not? I don't think much
it wasn't
notice.
Unexpected, because I found an item last night that was written in one of the national papers about the old railway station years before. And in it, it was written about 1990, and it said there was a decline already coming. Right. And there was a decline and over that period, the mid-80s to the early 1990s, as I said, huge numbers of textile factories and people working in that area, they were closed down during that particular period.
And what, it exported, I guess, products?
Oh, yeah, exported, and I believe quite an amount of it was sent up to Donegal as well, where you had the woolen factories,
of course,
or the woolen people making all this stuff. But the dyeing plant was the big thing in Cashel.
Yes.
That was a big thing to have a dyeing plant. And I understand that like materials that would have been developed maybe even in Thurles and Rathdowney might have even been brought down to Cashel to the dyeing plant. And remember as well, Fran, as you know yourself, at that time, the only big employer in Cashel over all those years would have been our 2 hospitals.
Of course, yes.
We didn't have a factory. And it was only after it closing down and into the noughties, the early noughties, that the pharmaceutical factories started to appear. So it was a huge loss to many people, and as I said, it was explained to me yesterday that a lot of people actually never worked after the day that they came finally out of the factory, the Cashel, the textile factory. That's just as it was known as.
And to the local economy then, when it closed, Tom, did it have an effect?
It would have been a big loss because. It was estimated that in the region of maybe 100 people. Yesterday I was able to manage, I've them written down here, I couldn't call them all out to you on the radio, but I mean about 50 or 60 names within 10 minutes yesterday that came to light. And as Corners people mention somebody else, you'd automatically remember yourself.
Of course, yeah.
Of people that worked down there. And you know, it was a wonderful place to have it down there at the time. But you know, that was the history of it, and it was quite some years then after that before other developments went in there, and of course it's in use down there at the moment as well. But yeah, that was the Cashel Textile Factory, 1969.
I have memories, Tom, and I'm sure a lot of people might as well. After it closed down, we were playing for years with the old timber spools for the yarn.
All right, down on the site itself.
Yeah.
I estimate that it could have been maybe 8 or 10 years before another development went in there.
Was it?
Or anything substantial. It was nearly 15 years from the time the railway closed until the actual factory itself opened down there.
Yeah. What about the political fallout? Because your dad would have been a politician at the time, yeah.
At the time there was a lot of discussion and debate, and again last night I was looking up material that I have here, and as I said again, nationally, even in the Dáil itself, there were questions being asked from TDs from all over the country in the late 80s, early 90s about factories that were closing. And they gave even lists of the counties where the factories were closing. And it was amazing how so many of them were actually in the textile business that were closing at the time.
We started to talk about this a couple of days ago by speaking about the sugar factory in Thurles, Tom. Yeah. And again, what comes across devastating, needless to say, that these factories closed, but the impact on small shops and businesses and pubs and the like in a town was immense. Yeah,
because there was wonderful camaraderie, as I said, and in fact I was actually told, and I know my own late brother Liam would be one of those, that nearly on a daily basis when they finished work, they headed to one of the local pubs for a chat and a drink, and there was all that camaraderie that was lost over that period as well. Some of them emigrated after that and went elsewhere, but quite a lot of them, as I said, they didn't ever work after that. And I mean, there were other names like Betty Joy and Catherine Ryan and John L. Murphy and Tracy Willis. Remember John L.?
Of course, yeah.
Pat Dwyer. There was a Tom Barry, Paddy Hoare, Christy O'Connor, Jerry Flanagan is supposed to have worked there for a period, Gus Hickey.
Did Gus work there? My God, I didn't know
Albert
that.
Mooney had a couple of sisters, and I think a brother actually as well, who worked there. There was 3 or 4 of them. There was a Packy Burke. There was Breda Ryan, who was Breda Ryan Delahunty, now out in Rose Green. Michael Murphy, Jimmy Heafy, Patsy O'Dwyer, and even I was told last night that Philip Cronin worked there for a short period as well.
Did he?
In the early stages, yeah. So,
and the management who came into Cashel then to manage the textile factory, did they largely go home? Did they leave the town? They
largely went, and I mean, we have Stephen Fallon, who's still living in Cashel.
Oh yes, yeah.
Well, I believe that Al Fallon was Stephen's father.
Ah.
And he was one of those who instigated, who was here for the establishment of the factory.
Yes.
And as I said, Martin Lavin, the family moved out of town. I don't know, was he from the west of Ireland? I think Martin was. They moved from the old road quite a number of years ago. As I said, George Robinson, I wouldn't know. Norman Lund, as I said, is still in great form, living above in Palmer's Hill with his wife. And you know, he had great memories of the factory and the people that worked there. And then I said that gentleman called Ogden. That name was very familiar to me when I heard it again in the last couple of days. And I think he might have been connected or related to some of the O'Connor families. His wife might have even been an O'Connor here in Cashel. But I think the debate today will stir up more interest.
I think so too, Tom. I mean, you've been writing on history for years, but there's individual histories of these factories.
And of course, you don't think it's so long ago because it was only in the early 90s or the 60s and 70s and 80s. You're not kind of thinking that it's historical enough to write it down.
Yeah, but it's half a century ago.
Yeah, but as it proves it is. And as I said, even the likes of Dick Luby and a few others who actually worked in Going and Smith's Bakery, that has already closed. And they were lucky to be able to move on and move down to the textile factory.
It's incredible. And some of the people you mentioned, of course, some wonderful characters there, so I can only imagine
wonderful characters.
Crack.
You can imagine the crack that they had down there. But it was also emphasised as well that the number of lads that came and girls from rural areas around Cashel, and in particular Knockavilla, Dundrum, all that area, Borlahan, Ardmale, the number was significant that came in on a daily basis to work. And finally, Fran, coincidentally, when I was clearing out the house in Ardwera where Liam was living all his life with my father and mother, when I was clearing it out a few months ago, I found this little box with a goldy coloured little box, and inside in it there was a Martin gas lighter, a lovely little lighter.
Yes.
And when I looked at it a few months ago, it was just, I remembered it the other day, what was engraved on it, only Cashel textiles.
Oh, wow.
So I brought it up yesterday to Mr. Lund.
Yes.
He had never come across it at all, and others that I've spoken to don't know why or where it would have come from. And it must have been given for some particular reason. But, I mean, how Liam had it, I don't know. But he actually had it. I have it here in the house. And it's wonderful to think that it was presented to somebody in the textile factory during that period between 1969 and the early 1990s. But it's a Martin gas lighter. And if there's anyone listening in that can remember anyone getting something similar in the factory in Thurles or in Rathdowney.
Yes, isn't that incredible? Because one of our listeners on to say I'm a proud Tipperary woman, but I remember the textile factory in Rathdowney on the site that is now Mr. Price, and she's loving the conversation today as well. Yeah. And Joe Noble was on to us to say, Tom is bringing me back memories of Phoenix Yarns. I worked there and I loved it so much.
Right, and they have an engraving of a phoenix, the bird, a phoenix, on the actual lighter.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Well,
and I took it out again yesterday. I have it here in the house, but that was above in a drawer in Ardwera, and wherever Liam got it, whether he won it in a competition that they were after having or what, I just don't know. And the people I was talking to since that worked in the factory and had connections with it, they don't remember it, but it's from the factory.
And you did right about the site of the old Phoenix Yarns. Thurles, it was where Dunstores is now, and seemingly the family name was Fitz. It says here, so I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
Okay, lots of memories coming back to lots of people out there with our conversation.
And I'm sure there'll be a lot more stories, and I'll be hearing today of lots of other local people that would have worked down there, Fran. And of course, when we were down around at that end of the town at the school and all, in the 60s, the late 60s and the early 70s, etc., the factory would have been in full swing.
Another conversation I have to have with you at some stage. I only passed by the other day and it dawned on me, the Gas House Lane, beside where Ginny Kennedy's used to be there. It's Brosnan's now, I think. I'd love to find out a bit more about it. Was there actually gasworks there?
Oh, yeah, that was the gas that was brought into the town by the town commissioners back in the 1800s. And there was a manager of it, I think, actually his name was Corcoran. And a family lived, you might have seen years ago, I don't know if it's still there was a very old little dilapidated remains of a stone house near the old gas house chimney itself. And I can remember the gas house chimney, the red brick chimney, but of course, when we were going to school in the Brothers, it was overlooking the playing field.
Yes.
But there wasn't a whole lot of it left, and there was bushes growing through it and all. But the manager of the gas house, that was a big thing in those days. Imagine bringing gas having gas in the town. I mean, our street lights and all would have been gas lights, and the gas came from Gas House Lane.
Incredible.
And I know that in the the early 1960s, late 50s, when the Cashel Palace was being developed as a hotel. I think it opened in 61 as the Cashel Palace Hotel. The big chimneys on the Cashel Palace, they're massive. They're red brick.
Yes.
And because they felt in 61 that they were too high, they reduced them in size by about a third. But they took red brick from the remains of the chimney below in the gashouse lane, and they were used in the restructuring of part of the chimneys on the Cashel Palace between 1959 and 1961.
Wow, isn't that incredible?
And it was only when they were redeveloping the hotel in recent years, now in the last couple of years, that they actually brought the chimneys back to their original height.
Yeah.
Incredible. But there's wonderful history there. Yeah, that was Gashouse Lane, and I think the man's name was Corcoran, and he had a big job like in the town over the years, and they had a little house and all down there in Gashouse Lane. Yeah.
You have a fantastic memory indeed, Tom. A pleasure as always. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks,
okay,
Tom.
bye.
Thank you. Good morning to you. That's a great Tom Wood there in Cashel with those memories of Phoenix Yarns, or the textile factory as we would have known it in Cashel. Any memories of that you want to share with us? 083 311 3311.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tipp Today on 1-800-938-007.
And we continue our conversation around industry and factories that close their doors around the county over the last number of decades. Glad to be joined now by Sinn Féin activist Dan Harty. Good morning to you, Dan.
A very good morning to you, Fran, and very good morning to your listeners.
And good to talk to you today. You've been taken by this conversation, Dan, because you remember some of the closures yourself.
Yeah, I do, and I suppose it was interesting to hear your last speaker, Tom, there. So he was speaking about Phoenix Yarns.
Yeah.
I was born in '87, so you're looking at the historical context too. It's to see. I wouldn't actually remember Phoenix Yarns, but there was a Phoenix Yarns plant in Thurles for decades. I think it opened in the early '50s or something like that, and continued on to the 1980s. So it would have been a very important employer in the town. It was a Dutch company, and it was located on the Stephen Amon Road there, where Thurles Shopping Centre is now. So I'm sure your listeners would have a far more insight and far more employees than myself on that. But that was obviously a very important employer in the town, working in the textile industry, with wool and yarn and stuff like that. I suppose that side of the road, we had Aaron Foods just up the road from Phoenix Yarns. Then I suppose I remember Aaron Foods a bit better. I have a lot of friends and neighbours and family that would have worked in Aaron Foods. Another very important employer for the town. I suppose it was part of the identity of the town. If you remember, the signs as you drive into Thurles, "Welcome to Thurles, home of Aaron Foods." Sure. It was very important. It was unfortunately closed in 2008 with the loss of about 90 to 100 jobs, as far as I know. It was actually originally set up as a semi-state company. At the beginning, the Irish Sugar Company, in conjunction with Heinz. They're looking at trying to modernise the Irish food production, I suppose, with an eye on export and the national market, to using locally grown produce, obviously, to Prairie as a rural agricultural economy, trying to have food production in some of the town centres. It was a good idea at the time. I suppose it was fully privatised eventually, and it actually changed hands a number of times over the years. Greencore was there, Campbell Foods owned it, and it was actually Premier Foods were owners of it when it was finally wound up. But again, the workers there, there was lifetime friendships forged in these factories and in Aaron Foods.
Of course. And from, I mentioned it to Tom Wood there just a short while ago, Dan, that what it did for the local economy, the smaller shops, the public houses, all of that kind of thing, because people had money to spend, and all of a sudden that was taken out of an economy, taken out of the town.
That's it. And there's these factories, and it wasn't just Aaron Foods, there was far more, there was a lot more industry and factories around as well, particularly down in the
GMX and
the industrial estate and that. They all had social clubs. They were very active socially, and that obviously spins off into the local pubs and the hospitality industry, and when you look at the square now at the moment, you remember all the pubs that were there. My family had a pub, Hartley's pub, in the square there as well at one time. It's changed the cafes now. Maybe people, you can argue that that's a good thing. There was probably too much alcohol consumed there at one stage, but look, it just shows the local economy was booming, and similar to what Tom was saying previously, it wasn't just Thurles, it was all the surrounding areas,
And Dan, because you're a younger man looking at this, and a younger man involved in politics, do you feel, was the town let down in some fashion by politics?
Well, the way I look at it, Fran, I do believe it was in some instances. Like, when you spoke about the sugar factory earlier in the week, and obviously when the sugar factory closed, there was a concerted effort to replace that industry. There was GMX set up, and Jobs, BSN Medical, and then Tickless down in the industrial estate. My mother worked down there for years in Jobs. It was an American company. Originally, and they were taken over then by Beiersdorf, a German company. They used to make burn garments and medical garments and supports, ankle supports and neck supports, back supports and stuff like that. But I think when that kind of when the manufacturing sector closed, GMX obviously was a French, was owned by Moulinex, so it would have been a French foreign investor, I suppose you could say, and BSN Medical would have been German and American at one stage. That foreign investment, when that dried up, I think, and the manufacturing closed down, I don't think there was at that stage. That's when the effort stopped to replace those. The sugar factory, there was an effort at that stage to replace the sugar factory jobs. I feel when the manufacturing in the town died, that's where local politics fell. I think, in terms of Thurles, it's very disappointing, and even in our broader in our Tipperary, if you look at the likes of Templemore and Roscrea, that there seems to be a huge imbalance of jobs were brought to South Tipperary compared to North Tipperary, and I think that's disappointing. But having said that, I think the local economy in Thurles, there's a lot of medium-sized businesses there. They're indigenous businesses. It just proves, I suppose, there was a lot of drive locally. The entrepreneurship was there.
Of course, but I'm just saying, in terms of the bigger industries and the like, I mean, Thurles ticks an awful lot of boxes. I suppose the main issue with Thurles is the traffic. But I mean, you have the railway station there. You have easy access to the motorway, for example.
Yeah, no, this is it. And look, we have to look at it, I suppose. What marks Thurles out from other towns in terms of investment? Thurles doesn't seem to be on the map of the IDA. I remember the IDA came in and did a presentation to the councillors one time around County Tipperary. I think it was mentioned that Thurles was only mentioned once in the whole presentation. It wasn't on the map. I suppose if you're a foreign investor coming to look at Tipperary, for example, you're told that the town centre is met by two national roads, and the only Bridgeton Point is a bridge that was built 500 or 600 years ago. You might just look onto the next town. Look, we have an opportunity now. We have a kind of a skeleton plan of going forward in terms of infrastructure.
Of a bypass and a relief road,
Obviously, housing is very important in terms of workforce and that as well. But look, I think that needs to be factored into it. At the moment, I think, even at the levels, you look at unemployment levels now, they're probably lower than they were when these factories were in operation. So I think that's an important point to make, even though there would have been huge emigration back then. But it's the younger generation that I'm looking at today. I spoke to a young girl doing her leaving cert there. She's from mine, just there on Monday evening. I was asking her what was her plans after she finishes her leaving cert, and she just said to me, "Look, I'm emigrating. I don't know where, but I'm emigrating." So it's very disappointing to hear that from our young people.
And that was her reaction to you straight away, Dan, was it? It doesn't even matter to her where she's going, but she's getting out.
She hasn't decided where. It's not the destination that's just dragging her. It's just that's her decision is that she's leaving. But that's something that we definitely need to look at. And I think, the future plans of Thurles, we definitely need, the government to have a look at it. The idea, I remember it was Shannon Development at the time that probably came in and set up the industrial estate. And I remember when the industrial estate was at full capacity and was working, because we used to go in there, with my mother when she was working in Jopes. And I remember when it all closed down and it was empty, and it was very. It wasn't a great sight. It was disappointing to see it empty, but at least now it's actually fairly full now again at the moment. You have Duggan's Veterinary up there, you have Hannafin's Furniture, there's a hardware store up there, there's a gym, so it's good to see it back operational. Same with the sugar factory, there's business and industry running out there again. You have Tip Fab and recycling centre and that again. So look, local people have stood up to the mark in terms of employment locally, and even around. There's lots of fabrication companies, engineering companies, and there's a lot of retail and hospitality and service industry in the town as well. So if it wasn't for just local people standing up and the entrepreneurial spirit there, and we were relying totally on government intervention and the IDA coming in, we'd be in a very dark place. But luckily the people of Thurles are agile and stood up and the place.
Well, certainly we're sort of overwhelmed with the amount of people that want to get in on this and talk about this, and it's kind of interesting. Sorry, did you want to say something else to that, Dan?
No, not really. I suppose around the industrial estate, what there was at the time, a lot of the sewing industry, Tickless was there. A lot of people, your listeners will know about that as well. I think they actually had a reunion last year. A lot of the workers there, they made jackets. I think kind of the Parker jackets or anoraks. It was kind of high-end jackets. I think they even supplied Marks and Spencers and stuff like that. So. I know Jobst was there, and they moved out to Archerstown. Then they built that as a BSN medical site. Actually, found out during the week that BSN Medical only wound up a couple of years ago. They reduced down to a skeleton staff.
Well, there you go, Dan. Is that the future? Do you think? Is it encouragement and support for Indigenous local businesses? Is that the way forward?
Well, that's the way the economy is in Thurles at the moment. But I do think there is scope for foreign investment as well on top of that. You have to look at the way manufacturing is going, even globally. A lot of manufacturing would have moved out of Ireland at the time.
Yeah, of course, to low-cost economies. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. You know what I mean? There was cheaper ways of production. But even those are under threat now. You're talking about machines coming in doing all manufacturing. So we need to, you need to remain agile. You need to keep on top of industrial, I suppose, evolution.
Right. All right, Dan, I must leave it there, Dan. But good to talk to you today, and thanks for your time. Thank you. Good morning.
Perfect, Fran. Thank you very much.
Good morning to you. That's Dan Harty speaking to us there. Dan is a Sinn Féin activist in the Thurles area. One of our listeners telling me, I'm from Carrick-on-Shore, Fran, but I love listening to Tom Wood speaking about his town and his area. All right, news and information is on the way. We are live from Nenagh today.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Hook On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Hook On. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Hook On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Hook On. See slatterysgarage.ie.
And you're very welcome back to Tip Today. Now I think we have Deputy Seamus Healy on with us. Good morning to you, Seamus.
You do indeed, Fran. Good morning.
The Gremlins are having great fun here in Nenagh today, Seamus. And Happy New Year to you and yours, Seamus. And thank you for...
And many happy returns, Fran, to you and your listeners.
Thank you for coming on with us. You're encouraging people, Seamus, to make a submission regarding the proposed harmonised parking bylaws. There's already some proposed changes there. Could you just give us some background on this, Seamus?
Well, I mean, this whole harmonisation comes from the amalgamation of North and South Tipperary County Council and the abolition of both councils by Phil Hogan back in 2014. And Since then, the council have harmonised all their various services, housing, roads, public lighting, all their charges, and this is the last area to be harmonised. However, if you have a look at the actual proposal, it's not a harmonisation at all.
No,
there's a number of different tiers being proposed in this, which is certainly not harmonisation. You would have thought that harmonisation meant this at the same charge right across the county as it has done in all other areas. For instance, grave spaces are harmonised at a single charge right across the county. But this proposal, moves away from that. Even though it calls it harmonisation, it's not harmonisation at all. And obviously, I think that people should have a look at this. I know now it's another difficulty for people to deal with, but I think it's worth looking at, particularly from the point of view of towns that have parking charges, because it covers not only the charge, and it's talking now about a three-tiered situation. Tier 1 for Clonmel, Tier 2 for Nenagh and Thurles, and Tier 3 for the rest of the county. But there's other things involved which should be looked at, like the whole issue of free parking time in the mornings, the whole area of revenue staying in the area where it's collected. The question of whether there should be a possible reduction in charges against the background of all the various charges that motorists are have coming on board now, like toll charges increased, car insurance has gone up by 17% in the last number of years, carbon tax has driven up petrol and diesel, and of course there's a whole cost of living crisis. But basically I'd be asking people to have a look at this and to give their views on it.
And Seamus, just for clarity, because I'm finding it difficult to understand this, the three-tier charging structure, as you say, Clonmel Tier 1, Thurles, Nenagh Tier 2, and then Roscrea, Templemore, Tipperary Town, Cashel, Carrick Tier 3, is that population-based?
Well, no one knows, Fran, to be honest.
Because it says it's reflecting the diverse character of each town. What does that mean, though?
Good question. I think it's something that needs to be addressed by the executive of Tipperary County Council. It's obviously, a way of getting around the harmonisation of the charge. I mean, all the other charges said are harmonised. Rates are harmonised right across the county. Grave spaces, the whole lot. But this, for some reason, this is an exception and is being dealt with in this manner. I don't understand, to be honest with you, the reason for or why there should be three tiers. I would have thought, and I think most people would have thought, that if the charges were to be harmonised, then it would be at the same level right across the county. And that's one of the reasons, or the main reason possibly, and why I'm asking people, to make submissions in relation to it.
One of the fears might have been, Seamus, that they would have been harmonised up. Where towns that were paying less than Clonmel, for example. I mean, would it have been a case that they would have been harmonised up to those levels?
Well, that obviously is something that needs to be addressed, and it's something that submissions from people could address as well. But I would be suggesting that, far from any increase in charges, that the real situation should be considering a reduction in the charges, because, as I said, motorists are finding all the various charges increasing. As I said, car insurance has gone up by 17%, and that's in a situation where, for instance, claims, the number of claims have fallen by 40%. The awards are down by a third. Yet the premiums are increased by 17%. Profits are also 13%, which is double the international average. And as I said, like, tolls are increased, and also petrol and diesel increased because of the carbon tax. And so I would be suggesting that far from any increase in charges, that the council should be looking at.
But as you well know, Seamus, with the amount of time you spent on the local authority, that they need this money because they're not getting enough from central coffers. So this is necessary for all of the vital things that the authority does.
Absolutely, and I think you put your finger on it. I mean, the fact of the matter is that over the last number of years, in fact, for a considerable number of years now, the grants available to local authorities, the funding available to local authorities from the National Exchequer have decreased substantially over the years. And basically, the department and the governments, various governments, successive governments, are forcing local authorities to increase their charges to make up the difference. I think the focus should be on making the Exchequer fund the local authorities, to the extent that they were being funded in the past. Another angle to this is, of course, the whole question, and it's particular to the Clonmel situation, because what has happened in Clonmel is that about 50% of the parking charges in the county are raised in Clonmel. Yes, a significant amount of those charges are not pumped back into Clonmel and the Clonmel Municipal District to improve, for instance, the roads and various other services. So that's another angle.
So what happens there, Seamus? Everything that's gathered goes into one pile then, is that it, and is divvied out?
That's about the size of it. In the past, when we had local authorities in Carrick-on-Shore, Clonmel, Cashel, Tipperary Town, Nenagh, the charges raised in those areas stayed in those areas and were used for the provision of services within those areas, and particularly in relation to the roads and roads-related services in those areas. And that's an area which again comes up in this whole debate about so-called harmonisation. The question is specifically in relation to Clonmel, the fact that most of the charges, nearly 50% of them, are raised in Clonmel, yet not anything like that amount stays in the Clonmel area.
Right, but doesn't that explain why the tier system is in place then? Because they don't want to destroy the cash cow that is Clonmel.
Well, I mean, the same could be said in relation to, for instance, the rating.
Yes.
And you had the very same situation there. It could also have been said in relation to grave spaces. You had a very similar situation there. So I'm not sure why the exception has been made in relation to these charges. And again, there's various areas in the charges that these charges and this proposal needs to be dealt with, and one of them is the availability of free parking in the towns or across the county, and that definitely should be harmonised. There's no question about that. I mean, there should be a free parking time, yes, particularly in the mornings.
And how much? They're talking about 20 minutes. A free parking period there. How much of a free parking time do you think should be available to people?
Well, in my view, in the mornings there should be. I would have a preference for a 2-hour window. Obviously, 20 minutes is simply not enough. I would probably accept a 1 hour, but certainly the 20 minutes that's available, or may or may not be available. It is available in some areas, particularly, say, in car parks and that. But certainly I believe there should be an increased free parking time. a minimum of an hour and preferably a 2-hour window. It gives an opportunity for people to do their shopping in centre towns, and to go in to the local chemist or the local news agent or whatever, do a bit of shopping and go home without having to pay the
So now is your time to make a submission. Then I think you have until the end of February, do you? It's
that's right. I think it's the end of February, and I know it's more pressure on people, but I think it's worthwhile, sitting down some evening at home and having a quick read through these proposals, and if you have any difficulties or suggestions in relation to them, and certainly make them before the closing date, because this is something that will affect every household right across the county.
Can I ask you about Mercosur before I let you go? You've made a statement on this, Seamus. You're saying Mercosur threatens the future of Irish agriculture and the Irish farm families. In the end, we voted no, but it was a bit chaotic towards the end, was it?
Well, it has been chaotic really from the beginning. I've spoken on this, only yesterday and again just before Christmas. There's no doubt. I mean, there is widespread acceptance that this deal is not good for Ireland, and particularly not good for Irish agriculture, not good for Irish farm families, and for rural communities. And there's various areas in it. There's the whole climate area. There's food safety, and then there's the import of initially 99,000 tonnes of beef and 180,000 tonnes of poultry into the EU. And I mean, immediately, and particularly having regard to what happened recently in the fishing industry, you have to wonder whether this is the thin end of the wedge, and whether we're seeing here now a real change in the whole agriculture area, and whether agriculture is going to become similar to the difficulties that have arisen within the fishing industry. I think there's no doubt that the government, left it certainly too late. I don't believe that they worked hard enough to put blocking minority in place. And I think now that both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach should redouble their efforts and directly deal with the European Parliament members, and particularly European Parliament members of their own parties, some of whom are suggesting that they're going to vote for the deal. And I think they should obviously talk to those members, but they should talk to the wider European Parliament as well. And the another feature of this whole deal is the whole question of democracy and the institutions. I mean, you have the President, Ursula von der Leyen, apparently going to South America next week to sign off on this deal. Without the deal having even been discussed by the European Parliament. That is an affront to the members, to the elected members of the Parliament, and it's an affront to democracy, and it certainly shouldn't happen. And the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach should make that clear to the President.
But you're right in saying there are issues among the MEPs from the government parties. I mean, Barry Cowan, Seamus, for instance, Fianna Fáil MEP, of course, saying the real question around Mercosur was not weighing up all the pros and cons of the deal for Ireland, but the protection of a subsector of one sector of the economy. So basically what he's saying there is that we probably are not looking at the big picture. What would you say to him?
Well,
in terms of the benefits of...
Yes, I take the point you're making, and I mean it's a reasonable point to raise, but I don't think it holds water. I don't agree with Barry, nor with Regina Doherty, who's a Fine Gael MEP, who says she's voting for it as well. The advantages of this deal to Ireland are significantly. They're significantly less than the disadvantages that arises from the threat to Irish agriculture, to Irish farm families, and to rural communities. Basically this deal is about preferential treatment for the big European economies, the big European powers, sale of cars, machinery, chemicals, to the Mercosur countries, to the four South American countries. That's what it's about. And any advantage to other areas of the Irish economy are, very, very little, if any. That is my view, and I think it's a view that's held widely.
But sadly, a lot of this is going to be out of our hands, Seamus. I mean, if the UK do a deal with the Mercosur countries, for example, I mean, that's our biggest market for beef. So we're in trouble either way here, where Mercosur is concerned, are we not?
Well, I take the point you're making, and I think it enforces the point that, unfortunately, the government has been very lax in dealing with this issue from day one. It would appear that the Irish government, the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach, wanted to be good Europeans, in inverted commas, rather than dealing with the situation from the viewpoint of the Irish economy generally, and specifically the Irish farm and the Irish agricultural sector. That's why I'm saying now that they should first of all deal with their own MEP members, and secondly they should deal directly with the wider European Parliament members to see if this deal can be overturned at European Parliament level.
All right, Seamus, thank you for your time today. Thank you and good morning to you. That's Deputy Seamus Healy speaking to us this morning. 1800 938 007. All right, let us move on. But don't forget, you can email us at any time at all. That's Tipp Today at tippfm.com. Now, we've been talking about factories and industries that have closed around the county and the kind of effect that those closures have had on the various communities. But I'm glad to be joined now by Sean Hogan. Good morning to you, Sean.
Morning, Fran. How are you going?
I'm well, Sean, and good to talk to you today. You're going to talk to us about the antigen factory in Roscrea, Sean.
Yes, Fran.
Yeah, would you just give us some history on it?
It was started up by George Freisenfeld, who was a German. The reason I'd say he started it, he was involved in the meat factory, and then during the war, he obviously couldn't have a German selling meat to England and these places, So he started a section of the antigen up in the meat factory, and then in about 59 that they moved down to where they are now, would say, before the close and that. And he started it off there, would say, back in the 60s and that,
Yeah, and tell me about the product and the like. What did they do there?
We used to make injections.
Yes, so it was pharmaceutical by its nature, then, was it?
Pharmaceuticals. We'd buy in the ampoules and we'd fill them ourselves with, say, sodium chlorides, atropines, betadines, bupivacaines, all these sort of things. And then we went into plastic ampoules, where we'd make the ampoule ourselves and fill it as well. It had to be done in sterile conditions and things like that.
Yeah. What was it like to work there, Sean?
Oh, fantastic.
Was it? Yeah.
I went in. I was about, I'd say, 15, and I worked there for about 33 years.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. We see, George at the time, the dinner dances at Christmas, as you know, did dinner dances around that time.
Sure.
They'd be all free because he'd be into that sort of thing, you know what I mean, for the workers and things.
Yes.
And then later on, when George Jr. took over, we had our own social club, and sure, we'd have trips to London, trips to Liverpool, trips to America, boating trips down in Lough Derg,
Yeah.
We'd cover, there was a Father Stapleton in Roscrea, and somebody knew him, and we went over and played a soccer team in London. That he was over.
Incredible, yeah. And what year was it wound up, Sean?
I think it was 2003.
Was it 2003?
2003, yeah. I remember, because I remember being on the been on the radio about it, and
Yeah.
just said, like, there's no great time to close a factory, but it's a worse at Christmas.
Of course.
You
it
know,
is, yeah.
and in
And did you
fairness-
get much notice that it was closing, Sean?
We did. Basically, it was a kind of it was going for about 4 or 5 months, you know.
Yes.
And we had been talking to Michael Smith Senior and that. Now, in fairness to him, I did ask him on the radio, would he look after us at Christmas and get us a few bob, because you know how these things take.
Yeah,
you know?
of course, yeah.
And in fairness, he did, you know. So, like, but it was very hard to see a pharmaceutical factory closing that made medicines for sick people.
Yeah, and why was it wound up? I mean, you know,
There was something got to do with an autoclave or something. You know, when we do the ampoules and that, we'd sterilise them in an autoclave. You know?
Yes.
And something got to do with there was a cool spot in the autoclave, and there were kind of one of the ones at the time. I don't know whether she thought she was great or something, or she was bigger than us anyway. She decided that she'd bring this up, but like it wasn't major.
Right. Okay.
When
it was instrumental in the
when they brought in the
closing,
authorities, was and they decided then that you'd have to close down to all this. Sure, I mean, there's only so long you can stay closed and that. You know what I mean, Fran?
I suppose. And the economy then, and you know, I mean, I presume that you would have gone and had a few drinks here and there, and maybe something to eat and stuff. The effect it had on Roscrea itself, Sean.
Major, because at the one stage there was nearly 350 people working in it.
Was there indeed? Wow.
And that you had all the people then with, say, Roscrea, you had all the Shinrones, the Burrs, the Turleses, Duncairns, Coolderry, all around the place. And they were all locals.
Yes.
So whatever money was being spent locally. You know, so at the end of the day, like, all that then went.
Yeah, and I was looking up some old notes on this, and seemingly the loss of the wage bill to the local economy was valued at about 10 million a year. So this was considerable at that time, wasn't it?
Oh, obviously, major, Fran, because, as they say, like, when you have that many people, and you see people then, younger people weren't going to, we'll say, colleges and things like that, because at the time, you see, in Roscrea, if you had an uncle or a father or somebody working in the factory, you had a great chance of getting into that.
Of course,
you know.
Yes.
So I would have having a brother, a sister working with me in the factory, and then in another factory, I would have another 2 brothers and my father working in another factory. So, you know, and then you see when they closed, Fran, there was a lot of people that had partners.
Yes.
So, I mean, all your...
the two of them working in... Oh, I see what you mean. Wow.
You know what I mean? So, like, I mean, when it closed, then these people were absolutely left.
Right, and I presume they may have had mortgages and the like as well.
I'd say so. I'd say so. In the latter years, you know. I know now... Like in the 70s when I went in, I remember I used to work in actually Bernie's super value there that burnt down there.
Yes, yeah.
And I was on $3.50 a week. When I went into the antigen, I was on $16.50.
Wow.
And like, I mean, the managers would have been on £32 at that stage.
Right. Okay. So this was so people were relatively well paid then, Sean.
Yeah, they were. Definitely a well paid job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like,
was there an attempt to replace it in some way?
There was, but you see, unfortunately, a crowd took it over. But I think the fella that took it over.
Well, you're not going to say anything that's going to get me into trouble now. But it didn't work out, Sean. Shall we?
I don't think that it's like buying it not buying it with your own money. You know
right.
what I mean?
Okay.
They stripped it of assets and things like that.
Right, but it didn't work. It didn't work out.
It didn't work out. You know. So I mean, at the end of the day, like, unfortunately, you know.
Yeah.
So,
but you look back fondly on those years, I can gather from you, Sean.
oh, stuff. And
Yeah.
I remember going to Loch Derg on the boat, and sure, your man was drinking, the captain was drinking the pint. And he says to me, he says, right, keep that heading there towards there. Me, on the boat. Keep that heading there towards the mountains, he says, you know. So he said after, he says, the best crowd I ever had, he says, because they used to bring 2 kegs of beer. Should we drink it all? No?
So great times were had indeed.
Oh, fantastic, you know, like, see, it was more a community, because we had social clubs and that. We'd have kids' parties and, you know, we'd have all these things, and that's why it was more, I mean, I still meet people after all them years, like, and you still know them and all that, you know what I mean? And they're all from around different areas, you know.
And what about the premises? What happened with the premises then?
Well, in fairness, now there was a chap that bought it there now, and I think he has stuff in it, like he has dog training in where we would have making the tablets in that tablet department. He has a motor factor in the boiler house. Oh,
very good.
Very good. He has a training thing, I think, for people, a FOSS kind of thing in another part of it. So it's been used anyway, which is grand. You know what I mean?
Which is a good thing indeed. Sean, lovely to talk to you again, and thanks so much for coming on with us, Sean.
No problem, Fran.
Thank you.
Great to be talking to you.
Thank you.
Then. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. You know, it's Sean Hogan speaking to us about antigen in Roscrea. Do you have particular memories of antigen? And if so, would you like to share them with us? You can speak to Leanne for free on 1800 938 007. Or indeed, of course, you can text or WhatsApp 083 311 3311. Mick O'Brien, my old friend Mick O'Brien, was on to us from Clonmel to say, I do remember Atchison's Dairy, because one of our listeners bringing that up and saying, does anybody remember Atchison's farm, a working farm on Queen Street in Clonmel? We're live from Nenagh today, back in just a moment.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puckon. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the Expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Join the conversation in Tipperary. Contact us through Facebook, Twitter, or email tiptoday@tippfm.com.
Time for gardening, and glad to be joined in studio by Ultan Nesbitt from Arabon. Good morning to you, Ultan.
Good morning, Fran.
Thanks very much indeed for coming in to us today. You brought in some gorgeous stuff. The scent in the studio is just fantastic.
Really, at this time of year, it's lovely to have scented shrubs or plants in your garden.
Yeah.
And you see, it's very unusual to have things flowering in the depths of winter, really. And I think there's some plants that really perform very, very well at this time of the year.
Yes.
So we have a few things here, just in this little arrangement here. There's a lovely shrub there called Viburnum fragrance. Which has a lovely pink flower out of it, but there is a magnificent scent off that as well, because it is very fragrant. Even in the name it says it's viburnum fragrance. And then we also, a lot of the viburnums are quite good, because you can get the evergreen ones as well, which are particularly good, and they're great for hedging, and they flower at this time of the year as well. There's Viburnum tinus or Viburnum tinus Eva Price, and they're quite good for hedging. But it's lovely to have a hedge that's in full bloom at this time of the year, and that viburnum is quite good for that. And we have another thing here then, which is lovely as well, if you want a small hedge, but very, very scented. And I always say, this is great at around Christmas time, actually, and even in January, February.
Sure.
And up to March, it will flower. It's a thing called Suracoca confusa, which is a thing called Christmas box. And then this has lovely kind of creamy white flowers that come out of it. Now, they're quite insignificant flowers, really, but the scent of it is amazing. It has that really high scent of hyacinths off it, a really, really strong scent off it. That. So as your guests arrive to your house and they're walking through up a pathway or something, and if you have that as a hedge at either side, beautiful. You have that lovely, lovely scent off it, which really is magnificent. Another thing that's very good as well to have in the garden is a climber that flowers at this time of the year. And there's some lovely ones that flower. There's a thing called jasmine, and then you often have jasmine officinalis, which is the lovely white flowering jasmine that flowers during the summertime, and that's particularly lovely on a patio area as well. But this one is nudiflorum, and this is lovely yellow flowering jasmine. Now the scent of it isn't as strong as the officinalis, but nudiflorum is quite a nice winter flowering jasmine, and that's lovely to have as a climber in your garden as well. Other things then that are very good, and they're a little bit more unusual, I suppose, a thing called Daphne. And I'll just hand that over to you and just give it a smell of that.
It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful scent off it. For a lovely, delicate pink flower.
Tiny miniature flowers.
And this has a multitude of flowers on it at this time of the year, but the scent off it. So that's a lovely Daphne, which has a good scent off it. Another very good one as well is the thing called Hamamillus mollis, or witch hazel. And this is kind of more of a kind of a spidery type flower, I suppose.
Yes.
Lovely. Yeah, you can get it in yellow or orange, or even in a kind of a red as well.
Yes.
But a lovely tree that you'd have. It's kind of a small tree, really.
Isn't it? And it's so perfect in miniature.
Perfect little flowers out of it at this time of the year, but great scent off it as well. A lot of these plants would tend to release it in the evening time as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, the lovely kind of evening scent off them during the winter months. So they're particularly good. Other things then that are very good, of course, I mean, are more shrubby ground cover type ones, which would be lovely, the heathers. And I love heathers at this time of the year. And there's different varieties of heathers that you can have in your garden. A lot of people would prefer the calunas or the thing called dubicias. These are kind of the more summer flowering heathers, and they're quite nice. They're lovely foliage on them actually as well. You can get the lovely kind of burnt oranges, or even a kind of a silver leaf on it as well, or the green. So you can have them in clumps, just even for the foliage itself. The dubicia ones, they're more acidic plants. We do have the ones, the ericacarnias, which are these ones here, and these have the lovely ericacarnias are more lime tolerant. So I mean, they can go. You don't have to add in as much ericaceous soil for the ericacarnias, and they're great ground cover plants. Yes. I mean, like one plant will cover nearly 3 foot. So I mean, really, you need very little of them to have an area of good colour, winter colour, at this time of the year. And again, heathers, very easy to grow. Once the flowers have aged on them, just cut them back, trim them back, and they'll come on again, lovely and full again for next winter. Just to keep them nice and compact. Sometimes people don't prune them, and what happens is they get a little bit woody and open-centred. So by just pruning them as soon as the flowers has faded is a good thing to keep them nice and compact.
So to have these flowering at this time of year then, when do you set them?
You can set these at any time of the year.
Can you?
Yeah,
okay.
Because I mean, these are quite easy growing plants.
Yeah.
They're really containerised, so there's you don't really get them bare rooted or anything like that. So you can sow these at any time. The only thing is really do water them well after sowing them. And I always think a general fertiliser, even the poultry manure fertiliser at the base of them, tends to give them a really good start. With the heathers, you can give them more an acidic feed, something like a sequester of iron, or even calcified seaweed is quite good for that as well. As a powder. Other things that are very good as well for kind of like a bedding plant, flowers, which are quite good, are the lovely violas. And I think the violas are particularly pretty. You have that lovely kind of delicate head on it,
yes.
which is particularly nice. And they're like little sunny flower heads that are looking up at you.
My colours are a little dodgy. What is that, purple?
That's a lovely purple colour with a lovely yellow eye on it. And they're particularly nice. And you can go have those in blocks of colours, and they flower right through the winter as well. I always think the violas are probably better than the pansies. The pansy tends to be a bigger flower, but it tends to get more damaged from, let's say, the wind and the snow. Yeah. While the little more delicate flower, the viola, tends to stay a lot longer and is more resilient to bad weather and things like that.
Are you always appreciative of the perfection of nature? Well, I think looking at this in front of me.
Yeah, and you see those growing in the wild.
Yeah.
You know, the lovely viola is a beautiful plant that grows, and you often see it in woodland areas. And I think the most simple flower is the most nicest, really. And they're particularly nice and very vibrant. Yes. These are lovely, then, are the lovely bellis. Sorry, I keep handing you. Anyway,
no problem.
The bellis is the lovely bachelor buttons, they're called. And they come in a variety of colours, and you know they flower right through the winter.
Yes.
They're a lovely combination with a thing called wallflowers as well, and everybody loves the wallflowers. And wallflowers are quite a good bedding plant, really, because you'll have them for a number of years.
Is that what you have there
Yeah,
now?
that's there. Yeah. And there's a lovely scent off that as well.
It's gorgeous.
And you can get they come in a variety of colours as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there's one called Indian carpet, which has several different mixtures of colours in it, which is particularly nice. And there's a lovely perennial wallflower as well that you can buy, the lovely purple one, which is quite nice as well. The flowers right through the whole year practically.
Yeah.
So a lot of plants that flower at this time of the year.
At this time of year. Would you just remind listeners, you gifted me a beautiful flower just before Christmas, and we are just astounded with the way it's turned out. What is it, amaryllis?
Amaryllis. And the amaryllis is a lovely large bulb that you'd get usually at Christmas time.
Now, when I took it home, it was just... would you just describe what was there? Because it was really simple.
Well, what it is it's just quite a large bulbus. It's almost like a large a lily bulb, really, that you get. But this is quite a large bulb that you put into a pot and have the neck of it just above the soil. So, and then this is a plant that you'd have in for Christmas, and you can leave it on your windowsill. But it's very important as well. As you see the lovely spears, these are lovely flower spears that come up. Yours probably had a double flower on it. Yeah.
And it still does. It's absolutely astounding.
And it's almost, you almost see it growing.
Oh, it grew so fast.
Yeah.
Up about a foot, maybe.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Even nearly 2 foot. Sometimes they'll grow quite tall. But the thing about them is, as soon as you see it growing, it's very important to put it in full sun as much as possible.
Which we did.
And have it on the windowsill and keep turning it every day so that it doesn't stretch towards the light. Because sometimes they tend to get a little bit top heavy because the flower is quite large.
Yes.
They're almost like a megaphone, a flower, that has that large tubular type flowers on them. And again, you can get them in a variety of colours. There's lovely red and whites, and then even you can get a bicolour from them as well, with a pink stripe going through it as well, which is particularly nice.
Well, we were childlike around it because it was growing so fast, and then it became just so beautiful.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that the magic of nature?
Yeah,
I mean,
incredible.
to see something actively growing, and an amaryllis will do that for you. They are quite spectacular, and they're lovely as a gift as well.
Oh, just really, really beautiful, and we so appreciated it. I planted new daffodils last autumn, but they're not coming up yet. Am I jumping the gun? Is there plenty of time?
Oh, really, daffodils, it's amazing because the weather's been so mild that a lot of the daffodils are well up now at this stage. So really, there should be some sign of them starting to come up. Even the green spears should start coming. But really, it is early. So there's some varieties that are a little bit later than others. Like it generally tends to be the narcissi that flower a little bit later than the daffodil itself. So again, just be patient. Again, once you see the leaves starting to come up, just give it a little bit sulphate of potash just to encourage it to produce loads of flowers for you.
Okay, somebody else saying, my early snowdrops have started blooming, but they look like they're beginning to wilt. Could the cold weather be affecting them?
They do tend to wilt after hard frost, but they always bounce back.
Right.
It's a thing that the way they protect themselves. They tend to wilt in the frost, and it's the weight of the frost on them as well. But they tend to, once they thaw, they tend to come up again. Now, with snowdrops, they're lovely at this time of the year, and I love them in large drifts because they make a magnificent display. And there's nothing nicer after the doldrums of winter to have snowdrops coming up and seeing that active growth. It's a good idea is to lift and divide them every 5 years or so, and always do that with the leaf on it. So once the flowers have faded, I would tend to lift and divide them as soon as you can, and then put 5 bulbs together so that you get a good display, and scatter them in a staggered row.
I noticed some black spots on my hellebor's leaves. Is this a sign of disease? And if so, how should I treat it?
Yeah, with hellebor's, the older leaves tend to get a rust on them. So it's a natural thing for it to get. So, but what you can do and because at this time of the year the hellebores are starting to come into flower, and they're a lovely, lovely thing actually. Another winter flowering plant, herbaceous perennial. So it's a good thing is to cut off all those old leaves that are on it, or the ones that are badly affected. So all the brown leaves at the very base of it, and especially the ones that had a little bit of rust on them, remove that, because the centre of that will have lovely fresh foliage coming on it with the lovely flowers from the centre as well. So it keeps it lovely and clean looking as well. And it's a lovely thing to do as well at this time of the year is to mulch around your herbaceous perennials so that it shows them off an awful lot better as well.
My winter flowering pansies seem to be struggling with the frost. How can I protect them during the cold nights? So we've had a few of those. Yeah,
really, I wouldn't.
Would you not?
No, because really, pansies and violas and wallflowers and the bells, of course, as well. These are all kind of winter hardy bedding plants. So it's much better to leave them, let the frost make them wilt. But generally, once they thaw out, they tend to bounce back again. But you can give them a more like a plant tonic if you wanted to at this time of the year, just to boost them on a little bit. So the sequester of iron plant tonic. It comes in a little sachet. So put the sachet into a gallon of water and water that over your plants, and that will actually boost them and tend to generate better growth on them as well. It doesn't force on soft growth, because we don't want soft growth at this time of the year. So it just puts on good strong growth on the violas or the pansies and make them more vibrant in colour than through the winter.
All right, you might take one more for me if you would. My fruit trees have no visible buds yet, but I want to prepare for spring. I wonder when is the best time to prune them?
Well, this is a good time to prune them.
Is it? Yeah.
It's a great time to do them in the dormant season. And really, a lot of that kind of long vegetative growth on the fruit trees, you don't. It's kind of excess, so we don't really need that vegetative growth. So what you want to do is to promote fruit spurs on it. So really, from the main stem, 4 buds that you cut back to, and that will force it to produce lovely fruit spurs on it, and therefore you'll get a better crop as well. So get rid of all that vegetative growth, prune back to that. Anything that's larger, that's crossing over in the apple tree, you tend to remove anything that's crossing over, or even rubbing against each other, because you don't want a thing called canker getting in on the tree as well. So any of the larger branches, do prune them, but also put a thing called an Arborix heel and seal paint on that, so that you don't get any canker affecting in the tree. It keeps it lovely and clean, and therefore it will sprout a lot better for you.
All right, thanks very much indeed for that, Ultan. That's Ultan Nesbitt, and Ultan is at Arabon Tion. I wonder, do I pronounce that right?
Tion.
Tion in Nenagh. All right, and if you want to drop in there, you'll be made fierce welcome altogether. Thanks for that, Ultan. News and information's on the way.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24111.
Thanks, Pat, and welcome back to the final hour of Tipp Today. 1800 938 007. That's the free phone number if you want to speak to Leanne. It won't cost you. And you can text and WhatsApp on 083 311 3311. Now we continue our conversation around factories and industries that were lost to us over the decades. Nenagh Aluminium was established in 1934 as the brainchild of a number of local businessmen who had been struggling to find a way of offering employment to Nenagh. Around that time, of course, there was the ill effects of the 1930s global depression there as well. Well, Dr. Mary Ryan is a great friend to the show, as you know, and her dad was the general manager of Nenagh Aluminium, and she joins me now. Good morning to you, Mary.
Good morning, Fran. Lovely to talk to you on this beautiful morning.
And lovely to talk to you as well. All of this talk about factories, now, does that bring you back memories, Mary?
It does. Daddy started in Nenagh Castle Brand when he was 14, and back then you left your national school, and because there were 7 of them in the family there in Kilriffit and Dolla. Rhines, Sean Ryan was his name. He died last year, God love him. But he started at 14, and it was a lovely man, Jimmy Mackey, that got him into the factory. You always needed the contact to get into these things, and Jimmy Mackey got him in, and there was women ahead of him. Miss Barrett was on the board as well. He always spoke about her. But anyway, got him in at 14, and then he worked really hard, and he always said from 8 to 4, like they were in, they were black and blue, because, and you said in your introduction, it was mainly aluminium supply, so they did all the cookware. That's what they started off doing, and they were in alliance with this Wolverhampton spinning company, and they all learned how to spin properly there. And then they went on to do road signage in addition. So Daddy worked his way up to a foreman and then to general manager, and he was wonderful, and he had great people skills. But there was 700 in Castle Brand.
Was there? Wow.
Yeah, 700 people. So it was a huge operation. And I mean, so all of the aluminium cook pots that we all had, they then went into copper. And I remember him going over to Germany, and they did some lovely copper pots. And I was given a talk in Ballycommon for the ICA group there, and I noticed all the lovely copper pots from Castle Brand on display, and they were beautiful. But the aluminium pots they did, and they also did loads for, and that's one of the reasons actually they did it. So all of the cooking implements were done for all of the different factories, the airlines, all that. And when plastics came in, then of course that went down and it went back, and they cut back a bit with employees. But it was a huge employer, and I always remember Daddy, there was always people coming asking, can you get my daughter in, can you get my son in? And it was a huge employer, and it's lovely site, as you all know there, that's now turned into which is great to see this is being used. It's turned into a gym, a fitness factory. But back then it was just massive, and people worked really hard. There was a good morale there. But the one thing I'll always remember is that I was really proud, of course, of Daddy being in the factory, was walking in, and he was in the suit. Yes. And then I remember Kaspersak taking over so it was owned by the O'Flannery and Cassidy and all that, and then it changed in the 1980s. It changed, and this Kaspersak from America took over. And I always remember Daddy bringing him out, and of course we were like the Americans come to the house, and they were the bosses. So there was a huge sprinkling for Kaspersaks. We were all absolutely. It was way more than you did for the confirmation, the communion, I can tell you. But anyway, it was just great. They were lovely people. And then it changed hands in 1991, and local people, and Jerry O'Dowd was one of them. They took it over. A lovely man as well, and he recently deceased. So it's just wonderful people. There's Willie Hayden that lives near me. He was involved as a foreman. Great characters, always I remember Daddy telling wonderful stories. It seemed to be real happy stories. People worked really hard. When you were in there, Daddy said when you were on the spinning, you were black. But he said, people were in great form. There was great crack. Daddy would always go down, shove up the sleeves, go down through the factory and have the crack, have the chat. The HR was Daddy going around the factory, listening to people's ailments, having the crack and getting on with it. So there was a great work ethic. People were proud of what they did. Daddy always, doing the aluminium pots, he was so proud of it. He's always giving out as if we used a spoon on the aluminium thing. He was saying how important it was to use a plastic thing and not to be scratching the bottom of it, and, really took care of the pots and pans. You knew he loved it. And then the copperware, of course, they were very, very proud of. But even all the road signage, that's all Castle Brand right around the country.
Is it indeed? Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And is Castle Brand, is it still operational from a cookware point of view and stuff, is it?
No, unfortunately not. No, unfortunately not. It's now just which is a pity. And I suppose just what happened there was it was the plastics coming on, and all the cheaper items coming on as well. But it actually, I remember Daddy telling me that they helped out with and the military equipment for the British War, the World War, because of the whole, at the end of the day it was industry. So people, there was a connection there between Wolverhampton, because that's where they trained on the spinning. So they
because it really flourished. I know it flourished in the 50s in particular, but I suppose that was because of the war. And
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But I mean, 700's the maximum. When Daddy was there, it was 500, then came down to 300. But it was huge. And my big thing of Daddy was that Daddy had a no leaving cert, and he was interviewing engineers. Sean Minogue, I'm going to mention him there.
Yeah.
He lives over in Nenagh, a lovely man. And he was interviewing them, and I was so proud of him. I'd come down from St. Mary's there in Nenagh, and I'd walk down at lunchtime to meet him and see him in the suit. And he always, I think there was two things, and he was an amazing man, a gifted personality, and he was known as John, by the way, in Castlebrand. But he was a farmer as well, so that meant, it was busy because he was doing the day job and the evening job, and we were all involved. But I'll always remember he had this thing about not having a degree, and he was interviewing guys with degrees, and we were always telling him, sure, look at Tony Ryan didn't have a degree, and look what he achieved, and that was great. But he retired purely because he wanted to go full-time farming, but I think probably had enough of it, because he started at 14 and stayed there till his mid-50s, so it was a lot. But he loved it, and he always had great memories, and the crack and the work ethic he always spoke about. And Miss Barris, he spoke highly of her, and she was a woman on the board back when women were never on the board. Spoke about her and about how fair she was and nice she was. And then the other thing he always spoke about how, the contacts that his father used with Jimmy Mackey, and Mackeys were well known in Nenagh. So, to get into it, you always had to know somebody to get in. And then, of course, we saw that because people were always knocking on the door saying, can you get my son, my daughter in? So it's just lovely. But it was huge in Nenagh, a huge employer. And, of course, when it went, thankfully now...
Of course, and the common denominator, Mary, between all of the stories we're hearing from the various factories that closed around the county is that work ethic and that loyalty to the brand, and the fact that there was a social atmosphere almost to the whole thing.
Yeah, massive. The work ethic was huge. It was all employing people from the local area. Daddy always, if you knew the mother, knew the father, you knew they were decent people. And that was the criteria. And obviously they had to have the work ethic. But you had to, working in a place like Castlebrand, you had to have a work ethic. And then there was, back then there was no HR department. Daddy always said he just walked down, listened to people's ailments, was fair with people. He had a great personality, and they sorted the problem out, and everyone was listened to. Everyone had a story.
Isn't that the way it should be?
That's the way it should be. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There was no, it was fantastic, and there was just a lovely loyalty there. I know there's another lovely woman, I'm just coming into my head, that she worked there as well, and I'll think of her name now, Mary Slattery worked there as well. So many people that I know that worked there, and they always, they loved their time there. It was just lovely, but the employment was huge.
And when it was winding down, Mary, and when it eventually closed, the impact on the local economy?
Oh, huge. Because, you lost the mine work then as well, remember, in silver mines.
Yes.
And that was huge. And to everyone, to the local town, because Nenagh was buzzing. And you had all the churches buzzing as well. Silver mines church used to be packed. There was a Sunday evening mass because of all the people in the mine work in Castlebrand. And I suppose it also, people were so proud of it. Castlebrand got its name from the Nenagh Castle. But then that was going all over the world, all over Ireland. There were copper pots was Germany, and there was a huge European market, road signage all over. As I said already, it did military equipment for Britain, and I'm sure way more. So it was just a massive. People are very proud of it that it started.
And you said that your dad was interviewing engineers and so did people with expertise come into the town as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So they would have employed, engineers, absolutely, yeah. So they had a peak employment of 700, so they had all the different layers of management. But that was the thing Daddy used to be saying to me, God, I'm interviewing all these guys who have degrees and masters, and I used to always tell him about Tony Ryan, who lived, who'd bought the house down the road in Dalla. I had said, well, look, he hasn't, and look what he's achieved, so just believe in yourself, back the shoulders, and tell yourself what you're always telling us, which is head up high and keep going. And of course, that's all he needed, and he got on again,
Of course
but he was a great man, and great credit to Peter Leeson, who I know is retired. in the Nenagh Guardian. He came out and interviewed Daddy about 2 years ago, and Daddy died last year. But it was lovely to interview him and took photographs and, printed it in the Nenagh Guardian, so it's there for people to see. But it was lovely just to...
I must have a look at the article, because he obviously had very fond memories of his time at Castlebrand.
Huge, and fond memories of all the people there and all the workers there and all the people that came to the funeral. The Willie Hayden and Ballinaclough, who lives near me, a pure character. Tony Ryan, my uncle, who's also passed. You know, he worked there as a foreman. They all just got on very well. There's a real camaraderie. People sorted problems out. You were a part of the family. It was a huge family. That really was the whole ethos of it.
Well, what I love is that since early this morning, since we started back talking about this, that names are being named, that I'm sure will bring up memories with people out there.
Oh, totally. Jerry Dowd, lovely man. And I'm trying to think, and I should think there's some other lovely person that I'm leaving out that I should have that was also very involved, but I'll think of it and I'll let you know later on.
Yeah.
But there's just some lovely people involved over the years that were just salt of the earth, and you know, you'd meet them or their offspring on the streets of Nenagh, and they'd always have a smile and a wave for you. You know, it was a great thing for the town of Nenagh and the surrounding area.
And because your dad thought university education was so important, was he very supportive of you going and doing what you did then?
Daddy was big into education, as my lovely mother Una was. But also big work ethic. I mean, all that generation, the work ethic was huge. They were big into healthy eating. That, of course, rubbed off me as well. Big into exercise, but big into getting on with it. Huge positive outlook. Huge of just getting on with it. And of course, you know, as I said, he questioned himself the odd time with it, but then he just got on with it. And that positive, that whole generation of men and women were amazing. Look at the women. They did the Pampers back then, and no Pampers did the nappies, and reared 7 children. They were incredible. So that generation were just very positive. They got it tough. I mean, Daddy walked in from Kilriffit in Dalla into Nenagh to go to the local boys' school with no shoes, and for a year he always told it, and then they swapped each other's shoes and took the come-me-downs, as everyone did back then. But like that all spurred them on. That's what gave them the work ethic, and that's what, you know, it was with no degree to get right up to general manager. I was so proud of him. But he had skills, he had personality skills, he had a work ethic, he had a drive, he was highly intelligent. So, you know, but that was lovely even for other people that were under him to hear, because they felt they could.
And Mary, we lost the factories and the industries, but did we lose, from talking to you, did we lose something else as well? You know, by way of that ethic for work, that drive. You know, have we lost that, do you think?
We probably have, but I'm a big believer that things come in seasons, and you always things come around. And I think that, you know, people will see, and there's probably a recession going to come in the next few years. It can't keep going the way it's going. And a recession will basically knock the corners off, and people will realise, you know, when there's less money available, people are going to have to work for it. So I think, you know, everyone listening, you know, the majority are great workers, but the work ethic is very important for all of us. If you don't have a work ethic, you know, the one thing I always heard Daddy saying was that, and Mammy, that, you know, it's just something to get up for. Aren't you so lucky? You're healthy. It drives you, keeps you positive, keeps the serotonin going, keeps your adrenaline going. It's a really good thing. But, you know, it's a good thing to be working, because you're not thinking and focusing on things that, you know, aren't doing you any good. So there's a huge benefit to a good work ethic, and it's all about getting the balance. But that generation worked very hard, but they also went to bed early. Daddy was always in bed early. They always had that good thing of eating healthily, working hard, but getting to bed. They had great boundaries. They really had, and they respected each other, and they respected society, and that's something I'd love to see come back more. There was huge respect for each other. There was huge loyalty to each other, and there was no begrudgery. They were all about helping one, and, you know, they were delighted to see people get on. I always remember, you know, there was a woman, Breda Ryan from Ballyphillip, and every time I'd meet her, she reared a huge family of 11, 12 people. But every time I'd meet her, she'd always say, "God, I'm so proud every time I see you." And that was lovely, you know.
Isn't that gorgeous, isn't it?
And it really was nice, So that sort of was the element that you always saw there, and I'd love to see that come back in. That we praise people, we say, look, it's fantastic, you're doing so well, proud of you, as opposed to begrudging. That needs to come back.
Well, Mary, I'm delighted you could remember your lovely dad and indeed the aluminium factory as well. Lovely piece, Mary. Thank you for your time.
You're so welcome. Take care, Fran.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Mary. Bye-bye. And that's Dr. Mary Ryan speaking to us there about the aluminium factory, or Cashel brand as it became known, and her dad was the general manager, and she herself having lovely memories there. I'm sure you'll agree. 1800 938 007. Back in just a moment.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puckon. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the Expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puckon. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Welcome back to Nenagh. Welcome back to Tipp Today. A listener says, good morning, Fran. We love this content. Great to hear all the stories from the past and learning about our local communities as well. A great friend of mine, Vinnie Savage, was on to us from Nenagh as well, of course. I remember when Castle Brand, back in the day, at 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock, there would be a swarm of men on black bikes coming in over the railway bridge. Everybody had a black push bike back then, says Vinnie to us. And a similar memory indeed from a listener who says, my abiding memory of Castle Brand was when the siren went off for lunch. Hundreds of cyclists would come over the railway bridge. It was like the peloton in the Tour of France. Some great memories altogether. A listener on very complimentary about Mary, and saying that was a lovely account from Dr. Mary Ryan as well. So 083 311 3311. Now, glad to be joined by another friend of mine, and that is Paul Lafford. Good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, Fran. How are you?
And good to talk to you today. This kind of sparked your interest as well, Paul, and it's taking you back down memory lane, back down Dowd's Lane, indeed, Paul.
Dowd's Lane, yeah.
Yeah.
My God, Fran, I was listening to the man you spoke to the other day about the sugar factory in Thurles.
Yeah, Eddie Bulfin, yeah.
Yeah, and it just, everything the man said, it just brought, like, you see, if you go back into the 1980s in this country, Fran, the country was on its knees. There was, like, as the old saying goes, we hadn't a pot to piss in.
Yeah.
And the country was broke. Like, interest rates, if you got a loan, if you managed to get a loan, interest rates were 18 and 19%. So, but Clonmel was bucking the trend the whole time. If you were to look up at, we say, the top of Ardea Hill here in Clonmel, digital were up there. There was about 400 jobs there. If you went over, we'd say directly across the road from the river from where you are this morning, Rowan Leathers was over there. Then you head down, we say, back towards Clonmel, you had Avonmore over in Shure Island. Then you had the Manor, which was a tannery. You had Burke's Bacon down behind where Penny's is now. And then you had Barlow Radiators, just down on Davis Road. Then you had Sheezers. And in the middle of all that was the centre of the Irish cider industry, and that was Bulmer's processing plant, apple processing plant in Dowd's Lane. And I worked for 24 years in Bulmer's.
Did you?
And
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, and I went in there, Fran, in 1984, and the manager down there, in those days when you left school, if you didn't want to go to college or go to America, what you did was you went off and you went into every factory and you asked for an application form and you filled them all out and you sent them all back. That's basically what you did. And I went into Bulmer's and I got my application form and sent it off, and I got a call for an interview. And I was sitting below at reception down there, and the manager at the time, his name was PJ O'Carroll, and PJ was from Cherrymount here in Clonmel. A man I liked. I had plenty of run-ins with him, believe me, but a man I liked.
Yes.
And PJ came out anyway, and I was sitting there, and he said, I'll always remember the words he said. It was April 1984. He said, "You're a Lafford anyway," he said. "You're the image of Kathleen." And Kathleen was my aunt, and Kathleen had worked for years in Bulmer's.
Yes.
And in those days, Fran, if it was a family job, so if your parents had worked there or anyone belonged to you had worked there, you had a fair chance that you'd get in there. And within a week or two, I got a call that I had a job. And I'll always remember, I couldn't believe it. Just get into Bulmers was a job for life.
And what age were you then? About 17 or 18?
I was 18.
18,
just after leaving school.
Yeah.
And it was in those days then, Fran, cider was kind of seen as the poor man's drink. It wouldn't have had a very, very good name.
Yeah.
But Bulmers, almost single-handedly, with the Irish Cider Council, they pretty much changed the perception of cider and turned it into a premium product that it still is today.
So this was before they moved out to the Waterford Road, then, was it, Paul?
They actually had their facility, the factory. It was down the Waterford Road.
Right.
The actual fermentation and after processing plant was actually up in Dow's Lane, where
right, okay.
they had. And I was sent up there in August that year, and I always remember the charge hand. He was a former Labour councillor here in Clonmel. His name was Billy Byrne.
Yes.
And myself and Billy crossed swords a couple of times as well. I'll be brutally honest with you, because he was a hard man. He was a hard man. But I liked him because there was another man, Jimmy Clancy from the Old Bridge, and then there was Jack Pike, God rest him, from here Clonmel. But every one of them, Fran, were characters.
Yes.
But you came into these places as a young fella, and you were left in no doubt where your place was. There was a kind of a hierarchy of workers, were it? Fran.
Was there?
And whatever about, you obviously had the management, who obviously had to have certain, I don't want to use the word standards, but let's just say if you were in danger of kind of getting too big for your boots, you wouldn't have to wait for a manager to give you a kick in the backside to bring you down to earth.
Right.
I can guarantee you one of the workers would.
Yes.
Because every one of them had a pride in the place, and they just had this thing that you went in and you earned your stripes. I remember Tom Farrell was the man that retired, Ginger he was known as, and when somebody retired, the next person in line then got a permanent job. And I always remember when Ginger retired, I was the next in line to be made permanent. And after maybe 3 or 4 years, and I was made permanent. And that's the way it went. You didn't go in, for instance, when you went in there, Fran, you didn't look for holidays, because you didn't get holidays. You weren't entitled to holidays. You were a casual worker.
You're serious? So there was nothing. There was no contract then, obviously, or no?
So you had a contract, but you went in and they broke your time every year. Then at Christmas, maybe for a week or two, because in the new year, then after Christmas, things would be quiet. So they'd overhaul all the machinery. And during the overhaul, then the place would be quiet. And then once things started to get busy again towards maybe the end of February, heading towards Paddy's Day and Easter, it would obviously get busy again, and then all the youngsters were brought back. But Fran, my GP over in Clare, Dr. Lyons, Morgan Lyons, he actually, I can remember him going in there as a young lad when he was in college. And so many youngsters went in there and worked for in summer jobs. And then they got good money, which helped to pay towards their college education. And I still, whenever I'd go in for my routine checkup or whatever with Dr. Lyons, we'd often look back on those days. Here he is now a GP. And he'd tell you himself that that his family, and in many families, were glad of getting the few hours or the few weeks' work in Bulmers as children.
Yeah.
And it's so many families in this town. And if you were to look at, we'll just say take Clonmel and head out towards Cashel, come back down towards Carrick, up to Rathgormack, Ballymacarbery, all the way over to Newcastle and Cloheen, and back to Cahir. That entire catchment area were coming into Clonmel every single morning.
It's amazing, and I know people involved, in factories that are tremendous factories and tremendous workplaces, but I never hear any of them speak about pride and being proud to be part of an organisation in the way that I have over the last few days, Paul, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. There was, Fran, we'd come into Clonmel as young lads, right? We'd come into Clonmel at a Saturday afternoon, and Clonmel town centre was like Grafton Street or Henry Street. It was packed with people. And the MD of Bulmers, his name was Brendan McGuinness. He lives up the mountain road. And Mr. McGuinness could be walking down O'Connell Street, and he'd see me. He wouldn't know my name, but he'd know I worked there, and he'd always say hello. And the production director down there was Andrew Healy, God rest him. And Andrew was a total snob. Now, and I don't want to make that sound like disparaging or insulting, because I wouldn't dream of it, because I liked him. But Andrew was, I really, really liked him. And he'd come in, and I remember he was one of the first people I ever saw had a mobile telephone. And I remember he'd come in anyway, and he'd sit down, and we would just talk about stuff. And here was the production director of the place, and here was number 511 or whatever number, I think it was 511 was my number, sitting down talking. And there was that kind of, like, you went to the dinner dance every year, like a management and staff.
Sorry, but just to hold on to that notion that you conversed with guys who were pretty high up the chain, that was the HR of the time, if you know what I mean, wasn't it, Paul?
It was.
Yeah, and it was so effective, wasn't it, that these guys mixed with everybody?
It was, because, Fran, everybody that was taken on, right, let's just say my Aunt Kathleen had worked there, and I came in then. Well, Kathleen had obviously set certain standards. So when I went in there, I had to set the same standards. And if somebody belonging to me went in there, it was the same thing. You didn't let your family down. There was a thing, and my father always said this, like, I mean, if you could have a hole in the arse of your trousers, and if your name is good, you could walk any street with your head held high. And I think that was the opinion of people. But down in where the crushing facility was, Fran, right beside the Friary here in Clonmel, and there was characters that were working there, like Matthew O'Donnell, God rest him, Frankie Fahey, Juicy, over there in the old bridge. Juicy's wife, Jackie, would come in there. She did the canteen. But you had all these people that it was like a kind of a family thing. And the place ran 24/7. And it was hard work. I heard that man talking about the sugar factory.
Yes.
It was bloody hard work. I can tell you, I mean, any few pound that people made,
they earned it.
Was hard earned.
Yeah.
But it was right beside the Friary. But the friars then, in all the years they were there, and the noise of these things, like the mills running 24/7, and it was very, very noisy plant. But the friars never complained once. And their living quarters were right down pretty much beside where the plant was. And once the apple season would start then in September every year, you'd always know when to start, like you'd smell the apples around Clonmel.
Yeah.
But they'd moved to the other side of the building, so to get away from the noise. But one evening, Mass then in the Friary in Clonmel was at 7 o'clock of a Saturday evening. And one evening anyway, the plant outside was working away, crushing the apples. And the priest or the friar was on the altar, and he just said, you know, after communion, we'll just pause for a few moments, reflection. And the whole place was quiet. And the next thing, anyway, at the top of someone's voice, just outside the walls, was Matthew O'Donnell screaming at Juicy, Frankie Fahey, "Juicy, turn on the effing water, will you?" And this reverberated around the entire church. The priest or the friar just shrugged his shoulders, and the whole place broke down laughing. You know, but these are the stories. And you know what, Fran, and I've often said this, I honestly do believe that in all of these places, there's a book.
Absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of stuff, right, has to stay well back there. I should never come forward. But there, I honestly do believe that the characters and the times that were so different. And, you know, I came into Clonmel on Christmas Eve, just gone, about 4 o'clock. And I could have parked anywhere I wanted on O'Connell Street. In those days, Fran, you came into Clonmel like on a Saturday afternoon. You went down to the Clonmel Arms, down to the paddock when Brendan Pettit had it. Yeah. You went into the paddock for a drink. And on Christmas Eve, you couldn't move in Clonmel town centre. And now they'll tell you as progress. I don't know, Fran. I really don't know. But I look back and I'm listening to these stories, like all the people I've been speaking to you now this week. It's a fantastic thing that you're running, because it really, really, really is reverberating with so many people.
Yeah, well, we're loving it, I must say. Really loving it, Paul. And you know what's lovely, and you did it as well, just mentioning the names of the characters.
And you know, when I was, after Leanne contacted me, I was kind of unsure, will I, won't I? And I said, you know what, these people, like, there was rows, Fran. There was flipping plenty of rows, believe you me, and there was fallouts, and there was, and I tell you one thing, Fran, these were times that if somebody deserved, I know what happened, right? If somebody deserved a poke in the mouth, they got it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you went in and did it now, like, you'd probably end up in jail.
You'd certainly be sacked anyway.
You wouldn't get time to put on your coat. But no, there was...
Yeah, Paul, I must leave it there, Paul, sadly, because as usual, I could talk to you all day. But you're a marvellous storyteller, and thank you so much for that, Paul.
And thanks for having me on and giving me the opportunity, Fran. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye to you now. That's Paul Laffer there with memories of Bulmers, particularly in the Dowds Lane area of Bulmers there in Clonmel. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with our GP in just a moment.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puckon. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tip Today on 1-800-938-007.
Broadcasting from Nenagh today, and our GP, Dr. Pat Harrold, is with us. Good morning, Jim. Pat.
Good morning, Fran.
And Happy New Year. Is it too late to say Happy New Year now? I don't know.
Oh, you can say it. You can say it for ages. Yes, it's the Chinese New Year.
Memories coming back to you as well from our conversations. You remember? Was there a lemonade factory?
There was a lemonade factory up around what they call Mary Spain's Corner, which is, when you go past the post office there's a roundabout now at the at the crossroads there was, I think it was called Dags. There was Dags up there, and there was certainly a lemonade factory in there. And the Bergens were across the road. If Pat Bergen or any of the Bergens are listening, they might remember. But I think the Dags, there was a lemonade factory, there. You never knew what would be going on, Everybody sort of made their own things. And everything was locally sourced, which was pretty wonderful, really.
Yeah, and of course the local jobs as well, which was
local jobs. And the other thing was, I think you might have touched on this, if you were a young fella from Nenagh and there was no work going, you'd fetch over to Wolverhampton, because there'd be sure to be a couple of relations working there. And when I was going to school, suddenly you'd find fellas turning up with Wolverhampton accents. You see, they'd moved back to Nenagh, and they all had the Black Wolves gear.
Following the team as well.
To this day, a lot of Nenagh people support Wolves soccer team.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, like my pal Michael Leo now, he'd be a Wolves fan. Poor old Wolves aren't doing the best at the moment.
No, I was just going to say, but I said I won't.
They're kind of an unofficial Nenagh team.
Are they indeed?
Yeah.
And somebody else to remember, of course, the late Sean O'Shea, who passed away the day before yesterday, I think it was. He was a friend of your dad's, was he?
He was, because my dad was a big Irish speaker, and he was a sean-nós singer. Yeah. And so I remember in the Ormond Hotel, which was just beside us here, it's gone now, unfortunately. It was the hotel where the Gate Theatre was founded. I don't know if I ever told you that. No. Michael Liam Moore and Hilton Edwards were on tour with Anya McMaster, and John Riggs Miller used to be a member of that troupe, and he used to travel around the country. Yeah. And they fetched up in the Ormond, and they thought, sod this for again, the soldiers. Like, we'll make our own theatre. So they sat down and they roughed out the plan for the Gate Theatre, and that's where it was founded.
Wow.
The Ormond Hotel. But that's, what was I talking about, Frank?
Sean O'Shea.
Sean O'Shea. And they used to hold Common Merriman down there. And Paddy O'Brien, the great accordion player, used to play down there. And Sean O'Shea would be singing. Prunchis McAnisa was there, Sean McRaman, and all these guys used to see television. But I remember Neil Tobin used to be the star of the show down there, and he'd be
divil, bloody divil.
But the thing about Sean O'Shea, he must have. I think he was probably the last of the Oreada Sagaiety team, which was groundbreaking music. And but Sean was an incredible storyteller and a lovely, lovely person. Like our own Nora Butler, he'd drive anywhere. He'd drive sort of 100 miles for.
But what I loved, I accompanied him a couple of times. But what I loved about him was that he was so easy to go. Like, if you were playing the piano, come here and play with me. Like, there was no such thing as a rehearsal or anything. But of course, everybody knew Pucker Brille anyway. So
and he had a lot more than that. He had lots of songs. Carrickfergus alternated the Irish and the English. And there's a strong feeling that
Bantry Bay, he did a beautiful job at Bantry Bay.
And there was one about For Sports Day or something. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah. A lot of funny songs.
If you've a break in the week, you might play an old. Something that isn't Pucker Brille for me.
We'll have to, for sure. And now we have to dismiss all that nice stuff there and talk about bowel issues, because it's prevalent, isn't it? Bowel cancer.
Yeah. Rory Shaddick said to me this morning, well, there's bowels in Antrim and there's bowels in Cork, but I don't think they do bowels. He went road bowling. But, yeah, Leanne, who's very clever, far cleverer than we are, Fran,
indeed,
set me on a thing from a really interesting researcher. He sounds very Irish, in London. And in a hospital in London, they have every sample of bowel tissue taken from cancer patients going back 100 years.
Yeah.
And they preserve them in paraffin, which is because they haven't destroyed the DNA. And because, well, for two reasons it's very important. One is bowel cancer rates have gone up massively, especially in young people worldwide, not just here. And secondly, with AI, they can crunch all those numbers and come up, hopefully, with a common denominator to find out what's happening there. So now he thinks it's multifactorial. There could be a few different issues, but the one that antibiotics came in sort of in the 50s, and that changed our bowel flora. And to give flour, people get a bit sort of weird about germs and things. If you think of your bowel, it should be like a garden. And there's loads of helpful little bugs that dissolve things and break things down, and they make vitamin K, and we're only touching the surface of how necessary they are. Your biome. And your garden should be think of them like birds and bees and butterflies. They are healthy things. And when you have an antibiotic, you just destroy all that. So, the people who are rattling in and they have a bit of a cold in the head for 2 days and they think they need an antibiotic, and we were saying it's a virus, you don't. Because antibiotic is anti-life, and they kill things, and they kill a bit more than the bug you're trying to kill. So it's not that we don't use them, but we use them sparingly and appropriately. And probiotics, the opposite. They're pro-life, and they're things you should take after antibiotics to get your bowel health back to normal. But there's a few things you can do to keep your bowel health going. And I'm going to list them out now.
Okay.
One is, if you have a family history of bowel cancer, get checked. Go talk about it to your doctor, especially if it's a first-degree relative. If your dad or mum had it, get checked. Because bowel cancer is, if it's caught in time, it's just brilliant. They literally take it out, put the thing back together, no stoma, no chemo, nothing. It's in such an inaccessible place.
It's great, yeah.
So the sad thing is, it's usually, well, not usually, but quite often, it's spread a bit before people can find out.
Yeah.
And by the time you start showing symptoms. The second thing is the bowel screen kit. Now, off the top of my head, I can't remember the age. I think between 60 and 70 people can avail of that. And I think only about a third of people in Ireland do. So if you've got a handy person on a computer, you can do it on your phone.
Yes.
Just
we're
register.
running ads about it, I know, at the moment.
Register for bowel screen. It's the easiest thing to do in the privacy of your own loo. Send it off. And I've had a good few patients now who hadn't a jither there was anything wrong, and they got a letter saying, come for a scope, and it saved their lives.
Isn't that incredible?
It absolutely has. And not so much saved their lives, but saved them. If you know about it when it's just starting off, apparently the wee tumours start to bleed, so the blood shows up in the stool. You can't see it, it's microscopic. But they do that, and then they do the scope, and if they just see a wee bleeding polyp or something, take it out, and it's sorted, So you'd be mad not to.
Wouldn't you just? The doctor I think you're referring to is Kevin Monaghan, is it? Dr. Kevin Monaghan, yeah. And he's on about this link with the E. coli bacteria. And is that because E. coli will flourish in a place that has been devastated by antibiotics?
Well, you've got a bit of E. coli, and there's loads of different E. colis. It's like if you had a load of dog breeds, spaniels, and there's loads of different types of spaniels. So some things are what are called pathogenic E. coli, they're dangerous E. coli, there's harmless E. coli, there's necessary E. coli just means of the colon, of the bowel,
Yes.
So, he found out that. Now, there's one, he isn't really making huge assumptions, but there's one thing people do know, is that fibre, there was a very famous doctor called Dr. Burkett, and he was out in the jungles in Africa, a Fermanagh man, and a Skillen man. I kind of been in his company, if you know what I mean. I don't think he knew I was there, but he came, he used to knock up out in the Skillen Hospital occasionally and talk to us, and he found that if you take fibre in your diet, you have a much less incidence of appendicitis. See, there's a load of conditions. Now, this is going back 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And he found that the Africans, because their poo was about twice the size or weight of the European poo.
Go on.
They had plenty of fibre.
Right.
Now, so I remember in the hospital, they all took this on board, and they all said, we should eat more fibre. So they put everybody in bran, which is horse food. Now, nobody actually said the Africans aren't eating bran. They're eating mangoes, they're eating papayas, they're eating vegetables and fruit. Loads of it. That's why it's all going through their system.
Yes.
And that led to a load of breakfast cereals, all these wheaty, branny stuff, which is horse food and not good for you. You know, because you should always think, like, what did my granny eat? You know, if you're going to eat anything, the one thing they know about bowel cancer or food that is processed meat. Because if you've got your pepperonis, your salamis, your bacon, all that is stoked in preservatives. Because if it wasn't, it would go off. The thing that stops the bacteria from making the meat goes off. You know, your garden in your bowel, your little birds and bees, they get killed. So if you're going to eat salami, and you know, if you're going to have bacon every morning, and then you're going to have a burger at lunchtime with a bit of bacon on top of it, and then you're going to have a pizza that evening, you have 3 doses of pesticide. It's like that effect on your. So really cut down the processed meat, and you know, eating meat generally. Make sure it's meat from the butcher. It's not processed, and any kind of processed food isn't good. If you look at the ingredients in the back of the packet, if there's more than 3, what you're eating is chemicals. You know, if you're getting yogurt's great for the bowel. Natural yogurt, like, that's it. You know, you don't need colorants, xanthine, palm oil, gum, all this kind of stuff, which, you know, a lot of these things are very new. They didn't have them in the 1930s.
Of course, yeah. Is the obesity epidemic, as it's described sometimes, is that playing into this in some way as well? Do you know?
Very probably. And constipation is a huge thing.
Is it?
Like, you really should be eating 5 different types of vegetable and 2 types of fruit a day. Now, who's doing that, you know? And so, you know, you have to keep it moving. And there's lots of other things to happen to bowels beside cancer. For anyone like who's knocking on about over 50, there's a thing called diverticulitis. And that's becoming more and more. Because it's like a pipe. You want to keep... And also the effect on your pelvic muscles and all that. You know, if you've got a loaded sort of a bowel going around all the time, you want to keep the thing moving. Now, it's a very interesting sign if you are grown up and you have a change in bowel habit. If you always went like the Dublin train once a day, and then you suddenly find yourself going once every couple of days or going twice a day, it's more likely that can be an early sign of bowel problem. So if that's going on for... Now, you can, you know, eat a dodgy something or... you can change. But if it's going on for more than a couple of weeks, get it checked out.
Right, so that's a sign that you need to maybe...
Absolutely, and don't ever feel embarrassed or anything, because your doctor's heard it all before. And we'd rather hear things because there's such a delay in getting things checked out, you know, publicly and privately these days. The sooner we hear about these things, the better we like it. You know.
Of course, yeah, but it is worrying about the numbers where young people are concerned in particular, isn't it?
It is worrying about young people. But then again, I'm just wondering, why do they feed kids crap food? Do you know, like, I mean, kids get some sugary cereal for breakfast. Then they get, you know, a children's menu, chicken nuggets and chips and sausages and chips and something and chips. Like, that's all processed garbage, you know, that you're giving your little children. Now, they should be eating normal food.
Yeah.
And as for those breakfast cereals, don't be talking to me. Like, you know.
I wouldn't mind. We were all brought up thinking, you know, bran was the thing. I mean, if you could tolerate... Now, luckily, I couldn't tolerate it. But if you could, it was the thing to have, you know.
Roughage. But, like, it's not what Burke had said. He said you should be eating fruit. And back to the lemonade factory, as local as you can and from your backyard. So the messages, I want to just drill this in. Family history, get checked out. Change in bowel habit, get checked out. Do your bowel checky thing. Don't eat anything if there's more than 3 ingredients in it.
Yeah, but it's simple advice.
And if you do eat meat, and if you do eat meat, go to the butcher and don't eat it every day of the week.
Yeah.
You know, give it a bit of a rest.
Are you appalled at what you've been hearing about Mercosur, for example, the possibility that we would be flooded with meat from dodgy sources? And
I have my doubts about Mercosur from the point of view of the Amazon rainforest. But I also think that in the greater scheme of things, the way the world is lining up at the moment, we'd be mad not to do it. Because if they say like they said when the Brexit came in, that we would have...
we'd be mad not to do a deal.
Yeah, well, they said, 70% of the beef sold in Ireland, in England, that was Irish, that was gone from 70 to 68. If Brazilian beef comes in, they're talking about 1% or something like that. That is, and at the same time, I think, if big agri-tech and big meat suppliers can hold the whole country to ransom, because there's a heck of a lot more than that in Ireland. It's a big market for people. And, most of those cows are fed on grain that comes from South America anyway. Yeah. So, are you saying there's a little hypocrisy there somewhere? Oh, and I think the way the government caved and the way the independent TDs just went for the populist vote,
But are you of two minds? With your green hat on, you're saying they're cutting down the rainforest so they get
Well, they're cutting down the rainforest for the grain to feed the Irish cows anyway. Look, in 200 years' time, they'll be thinking, what were we doing eating meat at all? There's no need for us to eat it anymore. There's plenty of alternatives. We don't have to eat meat.
I'm glad the show is coming to an end, because I can't take the amount of abuse I'm going to get.
Well, no, I do eat a bit myself, yes. But I probably shouldn't, and...
At all?
You could get away. You'd want to be well structured, but vegetarians are healthier. Like, look at a gorilla or a chimpanzee, they're as strong as innocent, and they don't eat meat either. Well, apart from if they find a dead monkey or something. But we go back to the grandmother. Like, when they killed the pig, they preserved it in salt water, and then they hung it and they dried it. But they didn't put in a load of chemicals.
Yes.
So this is the food. But America's are in some ways good, some ways bad. But I think the effect on Irish meat will be minimal, because that's it. But the fact that we have basically let ourselves down in Europe by negotiating for these things and then not backing it up. And they were so good to us during Brexit. It's got to give a bit give and take, which has given the right-wing parties a great chance to have a go at us. It's you want to be a bit sensible about these things.
Interesting opinion, and that's Pat's opinion. I hasten to add that as well. Dorothy from Cloughjordan says, thank you, Pat, for mentioning our dad, John Riggs Miller.
Nice man. Dorothy Riggs Miller. Yeah,
nice,
we went to school together.
All right, that's a wrap.
Great man he was. Great actor and everything. He was a marvellous guy.
Wonderful. Pat, pleasure as
Take
always.
Care.
Thanks very much indeed. Our GP, Dr. Pat Harrold. That's it for me. Leanne produced. Ali looks after content. Stephen has the time tunnel on the lunchtime show, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Look after yourselves in the meantime. Bye-bye now.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.